have your attention, please? Hello, can I have your attention, please? We're reconvening now into open session. Please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent. And I'd also like to ask the people in this corner of the room to be aware there's a camera behind you, and so your heads are blocking the camera. The cameraman asked me to remind you of that. So if I interrupt you throughout the night, it might be because your head is blocking the camera. Thank you, everyone, for stepping out. I'm first going to report items from closed session, and then we'll be getting into more of the protocol for this evening, because clearly there's a lot of you here. The board will vote on the grad waivers as part of the consent agenda. I'm reporting out from closed session. Now I'm going to ask if any board member would like to remove anything off the consent agenda.
I would like to take off the grad waiver for student A and table that.
Thank you. And I skipped to that because the consent agenda was what I reported out on, but now what I'd like to do is ask for a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask if we have a volunteer for someone to read the board norms.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Kevin Saavedra.
The board will come prepared and be fully present and engaged. Deliberate effectively and listen openly without interrupting. Work collaboratively and strive for consensus. Maintain perspective with a sense of humor. Not repeat each other or ourselves. Not have side conversations. Give full attention to the proceedings. No cell phone use. Focus on the best interest of all students and commit to no surprises.
Thank you very much. Now I'm at the consent agenda item. So now I'm going to ask first if any member of the public would like to make a comment on the consent agenda. Okay, seeing none, I think I already asked the trustees whether anyone wanted to remove anything from the consent agenda, but I'm going to give you a second shot at it in case you want something in addition to the grad waiver for student A. Okay. In that case, can I please ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. That passed. So the next item, and I'm going to say a few words. This item is for public comment for items not on the agenda. So this is not a time if you're here to talk about team or talk about the budget or about journalism. This is not when you will be coming up to comment. It's for any item not on the agenda. And I'm going to read the paragraph here, but it does really apply to when it is time for you to address the board. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Speakers are requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. Given the number of people here tonight, we will be removing the 3-minute limit and changing it to 2 minutes. I do want to mention one item, and it kind of goes back to the board norms. It's something that, especially at meetings with this many people, we request that you take those norms into consideration as well. It makes the meeting run much smoother, and we just try and hear your ideas. We want to hear them. I'm really glad so many of you came, but we ask that you try to remain as civil as possible. We understand that there's a lot of high emotion around this issue. I can't ask you not to say what you want to say, but I just ask that you be, just think about what you're here for and really want to hear your thoughts. And thank you for all coming. First, we're going to have the student trustee reports, and then we'll be moving on to the agenda items. So why don't we start? Do you want to start, Kara?
Hi, I'm from TAM. So our girls, our girls varsity soccer team won the Division II NCS title, which is very exciting. Our drama program, CTE, will start its production of Arsenic and Old Lace, which will run from Friday to Tuesday. Some of our global studies trips have been canceled due to the coronavirus. That will be our trip, fine arts trip to Italy, and then our language exchange programs to France and Spain. London is still under question of whether or not they're still going to go, and I believe Belize is still under question on whether or not they're going to go. Yesterday, leadership held a blood drive where they had over 40 students and staff sign up to donate blood. And our spring sports rally has also been postponed to avoid the large gathering. And two seniors in the
Can I
art.
just ask if there's any chance that the mic can be passed? We can't hear a word anymore. Can you pass that?
Oh,
mic or no?
sorry, my bad. And then two seniors, Lily Kahn and Ilaria Montanacourt, both won first place in the Young Arts competition. And I have flyers here if you want to know when their gallery is showing. And TAM is still working on the bell schedule to make sure that to get the 8:30 start by next year. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And use the mic. Perfect. Thank you.
I'm Lauren. I'm Redwood student trustee. So our boys soccer team made it to NorCal finals this past weekend, which is the furthest any Redwood team has made it in I think the past 5 years. So that was really cool, and they had a game at Redwood earlier that was really well attended. But they did lose that NorCal game 4-0, but they still really made it far. Our Art Honor Society is creating an art project in collaboration with our ASB president. So they're working to do rotating art installations in our cafeteria, which we've never had before, so students are excited about that. And we're having a crazy sock day next Friday, so that's part of a national event for Down Syndrome Awareness Day, and it was started by a girl in the Redwood special ed class who brought it to the leadership class. And so the whole school has sort of taken that on, and there's going to be a competition at lunch next Friday.
Thank you. Charlotte.
Okay, so due to the coronavirus, our open house on March 12th has been changed to a virtual open house with teachers available to chat and Kim, our principal, available in person from 6 to 7 o'clock, the scheduled time. And more on campus, during the past few days, all of Tamascal has been up in arms over the chance that team will be suspended. On the list of cuts we will be viewing today, it is the only full program on the chopping block. I propose that we have just one more year to keep team going while the district tries for another parcel tax. And then, a year from now, we can recess the recommendation to cut team. Thank you.
So at Drake, our student senate met last week, and we broke into our subcommittees, and we talked about different issues at Drake, including revising our dress code and also looking at maybe revising the way people apply for honor crew, and also looking at equity in sports. And then also at Drake, we are going to be having workshops to discuss and tackle racism in the Drake community. So we've had 2 of those workshops already, and we're going to have another on April 2nd. And I'll talk a little more about those at the next board meeting. And then finally, we are having our ASB leadership elections next week on Wednesday. So people are putting up their posters right now and running their campaigns for those elections. And there's actually a really good turnout for people running for different ASB positions this year, so that's exciting.
Very nice. Thank you. Ivana.
Okay, my name's Devana. I'm the San Andreas student trustee. And because I come from a very small school, we don't actually have anything to report this week. We're just working on our assignments.
Very good. Thank you very much. So now, what's the matter? No, we're not going to because I can't. Excuse us, sorry. Now we'll move on to the trustee considerations, and the first item is item 12A. So let me also explain how we're going to, or we already did that, I thought. No. I didn't see you. I'm so sorry. In that case, would you like to get up now to speak? Yeah, thank you.
So I'm
One
Dawn.
moment. She has to
Sure.
put the timer up. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Okay. All right.
There we go. Thank
Okay.
you.
That's going to make me even more nervous. It's like public speaking, but on crack. Okay. So I'm Dawn Matheson. I'm from Larkspur. I have no skin in this game. My son is graduating.
And this is for items not on the agenda,
This is
correct?
for items not on the agenda.
just
Okay,
checking.
this is a conversation that happened before the vote, and it's something I've been wondering about for years, which is why we have two separate school districts in Larkspur alone. And when I grew up, we had one superintendent for the entire county. And maybe there's something that I'm missing, but it seems like, why are we maintaining two separate websites? There's a lot of things that could be combined by combining school districts, and they've done that with the fire department, and there are a lot of people on Nextdoor who also have these same questions. That's
Thank you.
it.
No, I appreciate that. And I see somebody else that I missed. Boy, I really, and I know you. Come to the podium, please. Oh, my.
Okay, this doesn't have to do with what's on the agenda, but I'm addressing the new members of the board, and I hope I can speak like the FedEx man of 10 years ago on TV. But a little bit of history. The board saw the enrollment spike coming 10 years ago at least, and measures were proactively instituted to cushion the district. The board also foresaw increases in pension and health care costs. The primary measure was to build up the reserve. That wasn't done without some struggle and friction. I remember Bill Bridges, the then president of the CSEA, calling the reserve obscene and unconscionable following a wave of classified layoffs. The reserve was built up primarily by one, slowly raising class sizes to the contractual maximum. Two, not initiating some new programs. The International Baccalaureate comes prominently to mind. Three, foregoing some capital expenditures. An example here is the solar panels at Redwood, which we leased instead of purchased. Purchasing them outright would have saved us more money in the long term, but would have been a $2 million hit on the reserve. And four, denying staff raises sufficient to keep up with the cost of living. So let's make no mistake here. Both certificated and classified are doing more work for relatively less pay. What did we get wrong? We were blindsided by the special ed increases. When we look at Corbett's PowerPoint later in the evening, we will see that the increase alone covers our deficits. We could manage the enrollment and pension increases, but not the special ed. We were also blindsided by the need for more classrooms to house all the new students. Then Superintendent Lori Kimbrell told the board and told Mary Jane Burke and Trina Morris that we could house all the new students with existing facilities. It was a shock to the board when Sally Swan, who came in 2015 as Finance and Facilities Director, informed us we'd be $9 million. We need $9 million in new portables.
Thank you, Chuck.
We underestimated how high the pension costs would go, but we overestimated
Chuck,
that.
can you maybe use, because you're getting into pension, can you include that under agenda item 12?
Okay.
Do you mind?
All right. Let me
Is that
just
do
let me
you have
just
just
say a
one
couple more
sentence?
things. And this is to the audience. These are good people. They're not here, for reasons of ego. They're here to help the community. I was on a school board in 1979 when Proposition 13 was passed. At one meeting, we cut the library, we cut counseling. I cried when I voted to cut those things. They're going to have to make some bad choices. And the only reason they're going to be, and this is over the next few years, the only reason they're going to be making bad choices is because the other choices are worse. Tara our superintendent is going to be making recommendations she knows in her heart are not good for students, but there will be no choice. The voters have put us in this position, and that's where we are.
Thank you, Chuck.
And, I thank you, and you have my sympathy. I was there before. It was horrible.
Thank you, Chuck. Really appreciate that. Okay, I want to ask, are there any more public comments on items not on the agenda? Because now we'll move on to trustee considerations. So let me explain something first. The first thing we'll do is hear a presentation from Corbett Elson. And during the presentation, the board members will occasionally interrupt, ask him to stop, and ask clarifying questions, and the board is welcome to ask questions after the presentation. After the presentation, I will request that anyone that would like to make a comment on the content of that presentation to line up behind the podium. And at that point, because it is a large group, we will only be able to abide with the 2-minute rule. I do want to make it clear that when we're in this sort of situation, I have to have the same time for everyone. And while I was a little more loose on the public comment, we really have to stick within the 2 minutes. Otherwise, we're giving favors to one person that gets to go a little bit longer than others. And the reason why that matters is that it can be construed as though the board is allowing people to talk that the board agrees with, and we can't do that. I also want to make sure that people outside can hear, and so when it comes time for public comment, I'll probably ask someone to step outside and make sure that anyone outside that wants to make a comment is able to come inside and do so. I think I covered everything, and it looks like the camera can see you, Corbett. There's no one standing in front of it.
All
So
right.
to my fellow board members, please feel free to interrupt, and we'll give you a hand signal that we have a question as we move forward. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much, President Harlander. So I just want to preface this first off. While this is a budget presentation that must happen before March 15th of each year, it is an action item, but the board will only be taking action on the budget. There will be discussion about some proposed potential cuts for next school year.
One moment.
You just stop the presentation for a moment.
We got too many people in the room. We're gonna need to clear the room, keep people in their seats, clear the room, then we'll do a head count after let people in. Then we'll have people away from this door.
Okay, I'm gonna, in case you didn't hear that, raise your hands if you did not hear Lars, what he just said. So the fire marshal is here. We're going to have to clear the room of anyone that is standing so that we can do a head count in the room, and then we'll let people come in accordingly. So everybody that's everybody that's standing, please leave, and otherwise get into a chair.
Sorry.
You're making me nervous. It's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. No, well, Cynthia, just let me relax a little bit. Yes. We'll work with you. No, you definitely, I appreciate that. So everyone that is standing on the side of the room, or anyone that's not in a chair, please remove yourself to the outside. Now the hearing impaired one, where did she go? Carrie, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to get up also. Excuse me, I'm going to ask for a volunteer, one of the students. We have somebody that needs a chair. There's somebody that is hearing impaired that needs to be able to, we can't have her go outside.
Seated in the audience. 72, 73, 74, 75, 76. 76 in the audience. And then the governing board. 76 in the audience. 76, all right. That does not count the governing board. Okay. 107. 7 more. No, because we have tables and chairs.
So is that a seat?
No, these are no. No more. Oh, okay. Okay. Great. Excuse me.
Can we do anything with the volume area outside? Nothing like taking her off here.
Let's just get my mojo on.
Serious work.
Can everyone please be quiet? We're going to get ready to get started again. Pardon me? I thought I already did. At the beginning I said it was live streaming. Oh. Okay. Mr. Sondheim? David Sondheim? David, would you please go outside and let them know they can look at the slides on the agenda? If they have their laptop, they can look at the slides on this presentation while they're listening to Corbett on the for anyone that would choose to do so. Okay, I'm going to ask now for everyone to be quiet, turn your phones off, and direct your attention to the speaker. Thank you. I appreciate it, because sometimes it's really hard to hear.
Great.
Thank you, Corbett.
Thank you, President Harlander, Governing Board, Dr. Topier. Just to briefly reiterate, while this is an action item, the action item is only on the budget report. There will be discussion about some potential proposed cuts for next school year, but that will be discussion only in this agenda item. The only action that the board must take is approve the budget report. Any potential action on cuts for next year's budget will be handled in an agenda item 2 later. So I just want to be clear up front. There will be discussion, no action taken on proposed cuts in this agenda item, only the budget report. So with that, so why do we do a second interim budget report?
I don't think the mic's working. I think we need to shut the door. No, I'm talking about, so just clarify.
Shall I continue? Yeah.
Yes, please, thank you.
Okay. So a second interim budget report is the second report of the school year after the board adopts a budget last June. It projects actual activity through January 31st and then projects financial activity for the rest of this school year. It's a comparison. We compare where we were at the first interim in December to where we are now in March. That's a comparison point that we'll be focusing on, and obviously the multi-year projection, which is the next 2 years as well. The board must take action tonight on this budget report. I'm going to be recommending that that we self-certify as a positive certification, meaning we will be able to meet our financial obligations this year and the next 2 years. Unfortunately, that will not be the case in June when we adopt the budget next year, given the failure of Measure B. I will talk more about that later on. Brief agenda, a common agenda. I'll talk through our district's larger financial drivers. I'll talk about this year's budget. At the time of this report, the conclusion of Measure B did not happen. In fact, it was prior to Measure B. That being said, given that Measure B has most certainly failed, we'll be obviously talking a lot about those implications and some potential proposed budget cuts for next year for the board to consider. Again, we'll be talking about that, not taking action on this agenda item. So a quick review of the budget reporting cycle. For all California schools, this is the budget reporting cycle required by law. We're obviously down here in March at the second interim financial report. Very soon we'll hear from Governor Newsom on his state may revise to his proposed budget in January, what changes there may be. And then we have to present to the board, and the board must adopt by the end of June an adopted budget for next year and the 2 subsequent years, and an updated LCAP. So we go around the cycle, and this is the case around the state. So I'm going to start with the conclusion of the report and comparing where we were in December and March budgetarily. The 2 blue rows in the top are where we were in December, and the 2 red rows in the bottom are where we are now in March. So we're going to compare them. And then you see the current school year, 2019-20, and the 2 subsequent years in the multi-year projection. Every school district is legally required to do a 3-year multi-year budget. We have obviously included some projections that go beyond that, given the serious nature of where we are at. There are 2 rows for each one. We have an operating deficit or surplus. A surplus is where you have slightly more revenue than expenditures, and a deficit is the opposite. When you're spending more money in expenditures than you're taking in terms of revenues. Okay? So in 2019-20, this current school year, we are continuing to project a slight operating surplus relative to a $94 million budget. That's why I use the word slight or modest. But in the 2 out years, 2021 and 21-22, we are projecting operating deficits, meaning we will be spending more money than the revenue we're taking in. And when you spend more than you're taking in, that comes out of your reserves, or your one-time funding. Can you guys hear me? Do I need to lean in more? I will hold it. My height is not helping me out. Is that better? Thank you for that. Please remind me if I pull it away. I do want to denote a key distinction denoted by the asterisk in all of those. We have settled on compensation with all our employees through this current year. So in 2019-20, there are no asterisks. We've agreed on what salary future raises keep up with inflation, make sure their salaries are not eaten away by inflation. But in the 2 out years, you'll see that there are asterisks. And all that means is that we have not negotiated any potential future compensation. But if there is, in the future, that will add expenditures to those numbers. So that, for example, the 2020-21 operating deficit of $1.3 million is without any compensation raise. We cannot budget for that legally. That's an unfair labor practice. So should there be at a future date a future compensation raise, that will add expenditure and make those operating deficits more significant. I just want to highlight that because that's a key piece of information. So, long story short, we're projecting a very similar picture now in March at second interim as we were in first interim. That's not of significance related to Measure B. So let's talk about our revenues. We are a basic aid school district. What that means is the far majority of our revenues come from property taxes. Homeowners in the community pay property taxes. that comes into the district. We are unlike the far, far majority of the state where they are LCFF districts, meaning their local property taxes are not high enough. The state has to provide more money to them to get up to a comparable level. We are fortunate in the TAM district. We live in a community where our property tax values are so high, we're able to keep extra revenue. As I underlined there, the TAM district receives about $18 million more compared to what we would be if we were a state-funded district. We are deep into basic aid. We're primarily driven by our local property taxes. That's different than parcel taxes. We'll talk more about parcel taxes later. Property taxes, this is just a historical flow, a chart of how our property tax revenues have grown. It's a pretty common economic cycle there. You see 1 year where our property tax revenues actually declined. That was the Great Recession of 2010-11. Otherwise, it grew and has slowly declined a little bit. I want to point out an aberration. You'll see the note where it says, without Corte Madera Village Mall remapping, the property tax revenues in 1819 and 1920 would be different. That is a one-time aberration. It's extremely complex that I'm not going to get into, but the Corte Madera Mall next door had their property taxes remapped. Long story short, all that means last year in 2018-19, the county said you're going to reach into 1920, pull out some of that revenue out of 1920, pull it back into 18-19. So 18-19 revenues are artificially high, and 1920 revenues are artificially low. Over 2 years, the dollars are roughly the same. I just want to point out that aberration. Generally, property tax revenues have been declining, and that's consistent with the economic cycle going around the nation slowing down. I also want to point out we get all of our figures from the County of Marin Department of Finance. We do not project these. This comes directly from Roy Given's office, who assigns all of the property tax mailers that go out. Again, I'm going to skip parcel taxes. We're going to talk a lot more about that later on. But I want to talk about all our sources of revenue. Our general purpose revenues, again, are where you see our property taxes. That is by far the largest bucket of revenue we can access. We do get some state and federal funding, not much because we are a basic aid district, but we do receive large amounts of local revenue, roughly $20.8 million. That is where the parcel tax revenue is seen. We receive roughly $17 million currently for 2 more years in parcel tax revenue. We do not, and we also have extremely generous foundations. The Drake Fund, the Redwood Foundation, the TAMI Foundation provide close to $3 million annually to beyond to support the programming in our schools. So I give you a feel of all of our general sources of revenue. I'm just going to highlight a little bit that if you can look at other local revenues, you see the $16.8 million. That is the local parcel tax revenue. And then when you combine that with the restricted revenues, the difference between the two is pretty much the large, generous donations made by our foundations I mentioned previously. Let's just flip now to the expenditure side. We've had our expenditures increase significantly over the last 10 years, and there's 3 primary drivers behind that. Enrollment growth, I'm going to touch on significantly. STRS and PERS pension rate increase, which is a statewide issue, and special education cost increase, which is also a state and federal issue. So we'll take those 3 one at a time. So as Dr. Topi and I have been communicating over the last year and a half at every presentation, we've experienced significant enrollment growth in our schools. We've grown by roughly 1,300 students over the past 11 years. That represents a 35% increase. And because we're a basic aid school district, we do not get additional revenue from the state to pay for the additional teachers and counselors and support staff we need. So we've hired roughly 70 teachers and counselors over that period of time. When you consider their salaries, their benefits, everything that comes with that, the 70 additional full-time teachers represents a $9 million increase in expenditures. That is a significant driver of where we're at. And again, our property taxes have grown, but they have not grown at the rate of our expenditures. That's the crux of why we're here today. Enrollment growth is one of the 3 major drivers behind that. Unfortunately, we've yet to hit the peak enrollment. Next year, it begins a 2-year peak enrollment, as denoted there. We'll be in a 2-year peak, and then we slowly decline. Unfortunately, our decline does not decline as fast as our incline. So we need to plan that we're going to have largely the same number of students and largely the same number of staff over the next generation. This is an enrollment projection that the firm Decision Insight, a professional firm, came in, as you see, in May 14th and presented to this board last year. This firm is a professional group that looked at all of our feeder school districts, looked at the students in the system, and projected out what we think we will have here. This confirmed our internal projections. You see the arrow where it shows our current total enrollment, 2 years of growth, and then a slower decline. I want to point out and highlight, in May, these were what we were projecting. But when we actually had freshmen enroll in our schools, we had an additional 150 students enroll in our schools. That is significant. We don't know the exact reason why. One might speculate they were private school 8th graders that want to come to our amazing public high schools. We don't know for sure, but those enrollment projections verified our internal projections, and there's more students in addition to that we enjoy educating.
Corbett, I also would like to, I want to clarify, I know that the district also did one of the 10-year projections with a demographer a couple years ago, but they did, I think they must have done the same that this group did. It was the same trend, but they looked at birth rates, they looked at number of children per household throughout the county, and they worked with public, not public health, I forget the agency, but they did more than going all the way through to the feeder schools, which I think was actually very, very helpful.
I would agree, and I think it confirmed the similar information.
Right, so thank you.
Yep, thank you. So again, we are a public school district. The primary assets we have are people. We have teachers, we have counselors, we have staff. So we pay them. Those are our largest amount of expenditures. I want to highlight the three large buckets there: certificated salaries, teachers, counselors; classified salaries, those are our secretaries, those are our custodians; and benefits. The benefits are health care. It might be insurance. It might also be the employer-paid pensions that come with that. So the top 3 rows represent our people-related expenditures. And that makes sense. We are a public school district. We should be putting our money where our staff are. And in fact, on the bottom, you see that 86% of all expenditures are related to our staff. Again, salaries and benefits. This is just a pie chart that shows that same dynamic. The 3 largest pie pieces are salaries for teachers and counselors, classified salaries, and their benefits. So the second major driver of our cost increase are related to state-mandated pension costs. When a public employee, if you may not know what a pension is, when a public employee retires, they have paid into the system over the course of 30 years, a chunk of their salary each month into a pension system. The school district or the employer also pays a portion of their salary on their behalf into the pension system, and the state government also pays into that. That then, when you retire, I'm going to use Chuck as an example. Chuck was a public employee. He paid into the system. He retired, then he now receives a pension or a monthly retirement that comes along with being a public employee. There are 2 different systems. There is the STRS system, the State Teacher Retirement System, and the PERS system, the Public Employees Retirement System. STRS are really for teachers and counselors. PERS is for the classified staff, custodians, secretaries, and also county and city governments. So in 2013, Governor Brown and the legislature in Sacramento realized that our pension systems were going to become insolvent in about 2 decades, meaning they were paying out more money out to retirees than was being paid into the system by active employees in school districts. That was not a good thing to happen. So Sacramento realized they were not going to break promises to retirees who were living off of their pension that was promised to them over the course of 3 decades. So they decided we need to put more money into the system. And who puts money into the system? All the teachers pay more out of their salary into the system. The school districts or the employers pay more into the system, and the state government as well. Unfortunately, all of that more landed more significantly on the employers, the school districts. If you total up across the state, the total amount of the more, 70% of that is put upon school districts or employers. So you'll see those rate increases that represent those increases. For every $100 of salary that a person earned, the percentage shows how many dollars the employer, the school district, pays into the pension system. That has risen significantly as you see those rates increase over time from as low as 10% to 18.4%. Across the school district, that is significant. Locally in the TAM district, since pension reform began, those rate increases began for the school district, that has added an additional cost of $4.2 million. In a couple years when those rates increase, we'll add an additional $6.2 million. So again, frame of reference, we're a $94 million budget. We've hired $9 million more in staff to serve those students, an additional $6.2 million in simple pension costs relative to a $94 million budget. This is just a visual that shows that same dynamic for the STRS and PERS systems. The red line showed the dollars the TAM district was paying prior to pension reform. The blue columns show what we are now paying, and you see that significant increase. It's roughly double of what we were paying before. And this is a dynamic statewide. Special education, the third major driver of our cost increase. I want to be clear, and we all want to be clear. We all know we have an absolute moral imperative to educate every single student, regardless of their need or their background. There's no question about that. But the question that comes into play is when some students need more resources to get the same education as all of us, we need to make sure we're realizing where those resources are to educate all students. So special education students have needs, and they need additional resources to meet those needs. The question is the costs that have increased substantially in the last 10 years. The bar chart shows the increase for the TAM district over the last 10 years. It's averaged an increase, not just the total cost, an average increase of $1 million increase year over year. Do simple math, over 10 years, that's roughly $11 million increase of expenditures, again, relative to a $94 million budget. A big piece of why that increased change was related to some state law reform in 2012, requiring the school districts across state to be completely responsible for the total cost of education for a student that has needs requiring a non-public school placement. That is a change from where we used to be responsible solely for the tuition. Now we're responsible for the tuition, the room and board, and also transportation. Those are significant figures that are range anywhere from $40,000 per year per student to is approaching $250,000 per year per student. So that's the third major driver behind this. I do want to give our special ed department and our staff some serious kudos. They've done some things to be innovative, and they've created what's called counseling enriched classrooms, the bottom bullet. A counseling enriched classroom is a small learning environment for students that have needs that need to be personalized and met. This provides a psychologist, a special ed teacher, 2 paraeducators in a small setting of 15. By bringing those students back into the district as opposed to outside of the district where they're potentially in another state, not around their family, not being served by our staff. Now they're served here by our high quality staff. They're able to live at home with their family. And for the district, there's a significant savings. Each CEC classroom we now have 4 in the district, annually saves us about $2.8 million across those 4. Because of the success of that, what we hear from families, we're planning on opening a 5th one at San Andreas High School this fall. This is just a chart that shows how the total cost of special education is distributed across the state, the federal government, and locally. The top line is locally. If you can't read it, those are the local school districts. And you can see the trend there of the last 15 years. The federal government has contributed less, the state has contributed significantly less, and therefore the school districts are picking up significantly more. That is a statewide trend, and that supports the dynamic I was showing on the previous slide. So those are that is the larger financial picture for us. Enrollment growth, special pension reform rate increases, and special ed costs. Let's get now more dialed into specifically where we are now, comparing where we were in December and March. So again, in June, we are projecting an operating surplus this year. In December, we confirmed an operating surplus of $208,000. We now are projecting an operating surplus of $460,000, which is a change of $250,000. Again, I don't want to minimize that, but relative to a $94 million budget, that is not an extreme swing. I'm going to talk on the next slide what accounts for the $250,000 change. Pardon the small font, but I want to highlight some things. The first line is we've had a decrease in property tax revenue. Again, that's related to the Corte Madera Mall. Last year we had an artificial spike in revenue related to the mall, and now we have the supplementary piece with the artificial decrease of roughly $619,000. We've had an increase in local revenue, partially because a little bit of Measure J parcel tax funds, but primarily because of removal of stale dated checks. We have vendors out there that have not cashed about $74,000 of checks that we've issued to them over the course of a year. After a year, we bring it back in. Must be nice not to be able to need to cash that. And then we've also decreased, not projecting decreases in expenditures at our school sites and OPEB expenditures. OPEB are other post-employment benefits. Our retirees who were promised some health care support, we have to pay expenditures to pay for them because of an actuarial study that we have to do. Our OPEB liability has decreased significantly. Therefore, we are now not required to pay, we're able to reduce our expenditure by $320,000. We have large facilities in our district. We have swimming pools. We have athletic fields. We have gymnasiums. We have roofs. We have school buildings. And we sometimes unexpected things happen. For example, our TAM pool boiler, the pool boiler that keeps that temperature 80 degrees on the nose. The Drake pool boiler that also keeps it very precise for our larger community to swim in. Our water polo players, our swimmers, our PE classes, those have failed. So we have to replace them. Those are significant expenditures. In addition, the Drake elevator, for those that know the sixplex out there. If a student is not able to climb the stairs, you must take an elevator, and we have to provide access to that. That elevator's now failed, and we have to budget for that. Those three items together represent an additional unexpected cost of $825,000. On a more positive note, we're now projecting we'll spend less, $824,000 less in special ed costs. That it may be an anomaly or might be a pattern, but there's less students that are requiring MPS placement than there were in previous years. So the total of all those net out to a total variance of $252,000 for the better compared to where we were in December. So remember that $252,000. That's just, again, comparing where we were for this budget for first interim compared to second interim. That change, then, where does that difference go? That goes to our reserve, or our savings account for the district, which is on the right, the ending fund balance. In December, we projected our fund balance would be $16 million. It's increasing by that same $252,000, and now we're projecting ending this year at $16.29 million. That 17% represents, that dollar figure divided by our total annual expenditures represents 17%. For a frame of reference, our parcel taxes that are going to expire in a couple years are $16.8 million. So in 1 year, we would deplete our reserves completely and move into insolvent status. We also have other funds besides general funds. I'm not going to touch on that. These are the various other funds that all districts have. The one I want to highlight is the Capital Outlay Fund. Roughly start of the year, $2.7 million. We just transferred some funding over to that. That's going to be depleted pretty quickly in the next 3 years, giving the baseball fields, the turf fields, the pool laminating in all 3 pools, unexpected TAM pool boiler changes, elevators. Facilities are an expensive business. Those rack up large figures very quickly. That fund, the Capital Outlay Fund, is my concern outside of the general fund that we have to pay close attention to, is making sure we're maintaining and investing in our facilities. So let's get beyond this current year and look at our multi-year projections. So this current year is the 2019-20 school year. We're required to do a multi-year projection of 3 years. So let's look at the next 2 years and see what we're projecting. Again, as noted, when we completed these figures, we did not know the outcome of Measure B. Now we know the outcome, and we know we will not be receiving $6 million in initial revenue. And we also have a question whether we'll be able to pass, what security we have about passing a future parcel tax measure at this point. So multi-year projection assumptions, again, for the 2 out years, 2020-21 and 21-22. Let's talk about revenues again. So again, the County of Marin is projecting our local property taxes will grow by 6% and 4.8%. Federal and state revenue is expected to remain the same, and our local revenue is expected to increase by 3%. That's the defined parcel tax increase year over year to keep up with inflation. Make sure those dollars, the services provided, are not eaten away by inflation. I do want to make a note that next year our parcel tax revenues will take us a one-time dip. We saw a significant increase in the number of seniors who filed a parcel tax exemption this winter. That will be financially impacted next year, and then we'll continue to go 3% year over year. Those are our revenues.
Was that directly related to the notification that you sent out? The district sent
I
out?
believe it likely is, yes. So on the expenditure side, we touched on enrollment. We still have a 2-year peak coming up where we need to make sure we have all the teachers and counselors need to serve our students. Therefore, we need to plan for certificated hiring, teachers and counselors with some minor increases and decreases. The district has made already over the last 2 years $5.8 million of ongoing expenditure reductions. That is all prior to this evening. We have reinstated the assistant superintendent of ed service position and a teacher leader model into the budget. That being said, later on in this presentation, a proposed cut for next year is no longer bringing back the teacher leader model. We'll touch more on that in a moment. Also, as I stated before, all employee groups have agreed to a raise for this current year, but not the 2 out years. So the cost of a 1% raise is $557,000. You do simple math, let's say a 2% raise to keep up with inflation. That adds over $1 million of expenditures next year and the year after that, because it's ongoing. And then we'll negotiate the following year. So those red operating deficits we're projecting will get further larger quite quickly. And there's some other items I've touched on about special ed. We've negotiated a healthcare cap for new employees, and utilities expenses continue to grow like they do everywhere. So again, this is the same slide you saw before, a summary of where we are. A modest surplus this year, but growing operating deficits next year and the year after that, and those figures will get larger when the time comes of a potential staff compensation raise occurs. I also want to highlight the parcel tax expires in June of 2022. So we are assuming that we have all the current parcel tax revenue here. The year out, 2022-23, we will lose $16.8 million of parcel tax revenue relative to a $94 million budget. That is something we can't let happen. We'll see some information in a moment.
Can I just clarify? I mean, it seems obvious, but so that would wipe out our reserve and put us into deficit spending for the following year. Correct.
So if this laser pointer is working, it is. To your point, this is our current reserve. We're projecting in a few years, $14.5 million. If the parcel tax revenue of roughly $17 million expires, we will exhaust that within 1 year. We'll become insolvent. We will not be able to pay our bills.
No, we wouldn't do that. You cut spending.
That's correct. But until we cut expenditures, this is what we're projecting. So this is just what a multi-year projection looks like. I'm not going to go into this, but it shows the revenues, the expenditures in more detail. Here are the 3 figures that I highlighted are projected operating surpluses and deficits without any future compensation increase. And the notes I highlighted. So we do have to have a second interim certification per Assembly Bill 1200. I'm as a CFO, stating that the district will be able to meet its financial obligation for this current year and the 2 subsequent years. So the district is self-certifying as positive. That's my recommendation to the board in the consideration of approving. That's the only action on this. But again, in June, we will not, in the 3rd year out, when we adopt a budget, that will not show parcel tax revenue. We will likely not be able to recommend a positive budget. We'll likely have to recommend a qualified or a negative budget, which means we will not be able to pay all our financial obligations of salary and benefit in that 3rd year.
Corbett?
Yes.
I have a question.
Please.
I know we went through this previously where we had a conditional approval and the county felt that it was a likelihood that we would pass the Measure J. This year, so in June, when we have the MYP and the county sees what our 3rd year out is, are you going to be meeting with the county soon to get a sense of what the requirements will be in order for them to give a conditional certification? Or
Yes.
And what are the implications if they cannot?
Yes. So late last week, when it unfortunately became clear that Measure B was going to fail, Dr. Topi and I reached out to our counterparts, the Marin County Office of Education, or MCOE. These county offices of ed provide financial oversight for districts. If the districts are not able to balance their books, they have the responsibility to come in and make sure our books are balanced for us. So Dr. Topi and I emailed Mary Jane Burke, the county superintendent, and the Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Ms. Kate Lane, to share our current state, and that we will be meeting with them next Wednesday afternoon. To your other question, if we are able to submit a budget that is qualified or negative, meaning we cannot commit to that, they will likely potentially not approve our budget unless we come forward as a governing board with a very specific timeline of what financial adjustments, revenue measures, expenditure cuts we'll make in order to have a balanced budget. They will send our budget back to us until the governing board provides a plan that makes those adjustments, if that answers your question.
Right, so that's coming up pretty quickly. That's this summer, this June, we'll be working on that.
Yes, I think
Okay.
MCOE will be in frequent communication with us and attending our meetings to answer questions because they have a legal obligation to provide financial oversight for all school districts.
Thank you.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit more about the implications of Measure B. And I think we can now say it has failed. All the votes have not been counted. We need a 67% approval by all the voters. That is a very high threshold. That's what's called a supermajority. Unfortunately, we're short. 62% of the voters approved it. While I feel great that 62% supported our measure, but the community, a 5% difference is significant and a very loud statement from our community on their feelings about what revenues we should be having and what expenditures we should be having. So we need to adjust accordingly. So again, a quick review, our existing parcel tax revenues, not Measure B, but our existing, represent $17 million of annual revenue. It accounts for roughly 17% of our budget, and they all expire in June of 22, meaning that we will not have any revenue after the 2021-22 school year. The language from the ballot measure that the voters approved is, I'm not going to read it to you, but it's basically for teachers and counselors. High quality teachers and programming, excellent instruction, art, music programming, and to prepare our students for college and careers. Basically, you should read teachers and counselors in all areas across our district is what that means. That community wanted great teachers. So if the parcel tax expires, like Trustee Ronish mentioned, the district will be forced to make $16.8 million of cuts in programs and staffing unless any other adjustments were made. Without that increase in funding beyond our existing parcel tax, the district would be facing those ongoing deficits in the multi-year projection. And those operating deficits are structural and exist even without any staff compensation raises for our teachers and our counselors, who also are facing expenses in their pocketbook, who are also wanting to make sure inflation is not, their salaries are not eaten away by inflation as well. We all live in an expensive area. So, here are current and projected operating deficits with some sort of staff compensation and without. The top is without any compensation increases for any teacher, any counselor, any custodian, any secretary, any principal. We again are projecting next year a deficit of $1.3 million. That's the same one we saw earlier. We're projecting a $226,000 deficit. Again, modest relative to a $94 million budget. But again, in June of 22, our parcel tax revenues expire unless a new one is brought in. We would face, hypothetically, a $17.1 million operating deficit. But that's not possible. As Trustee Ronish pointed out, our reserves are not there. We would run out of cash. We would not be able to make payroll very quickly. We would become that's called insolvent. And that's where the County Office of Education has the legal requirement to make changes for us in terms of staffing, unless we and a local governing board make the changes for ourselves. I would much prefer that we make the changes. We know our community, we know our district, as opposed to an outside entity, but we have to do that work. The bottom row shows what those operating deficits would be with compensation increases. A modest increase for our teachers and our counselors. But again, a cost of 1% raise. Just a 1% raise is over $500,000. If you do simple math, a 2% raise adds an additional $1 million of expenditure increase. You get to $3 million and $3.8 million quite quickly, and again, we'll become insolvent that third year out. This is a slide we promoted and brought around the community in January and February, Dr. Topi and I. We talked about, unfortunately, the possibility, what should Measure B fail? We hoped it would not be the case, but we felt like we had to remind the community what we'd be facing. And we stated that the board would analyze the results of Measure B. We haven't gotten those yet. We'd reassess what the community told us, what messaging they told us about their values and what level of support they have for us. And then possibly go back out to the community in another parcel tax election in November of 2020. That has not been decided. That's only a board discussion, and they are the only ones authorized to do that. But during, on the bottom, the 2020-21 school year, we'd reestablish the same fiscal advisory committee that we had last year, made up of teachers, parents, administrators, trustees, community members at large, who recommended the $3 million of cuts from last year. We're going to bring that committee back together. We're going to reconvene them, and pending to make recommendations on significant and future budget cuts. And you'll see there, including but not limited to district-wide programming. I just want to be clear on what programming is. Programming are courses, they're electives, and the teachers associated with that. We have cut everything, $5.8 million away from the classroom. As we stated here prior to Measure B, we stated we would have no choice but to cut academic programming, unfortunately, if that happened.
I wanted to point out that Kara has a question.
Sorry, Kara. Yeah.
I know we talked about it at a board meeting in the fall, but if you do reconvene the fiscal advisory committee, making sure some student representation. Yes? Oh yeah, sorry, student representation on the fiscal advisory committee. We talked about that in the fall, but if it resurfaces as something, yeah.
I think we agree. Make sure we have more representation for students. Thank you, Kara. And last, I just want to note, whatever cuts the new fiscal advisory committee recommends, those would need to be in addition to the cuts already made, the $5.8 million of ongoing cuts. So next steps. I think it's safe to say Measure B failed. So we need to take immediate steps to reduce deficit spending for the next school year. Those are I'll go over that in the next slides. Again, those are proposed cuts that the board will discuss. We're not taking action on this agenda item, but for discussion. Next, in spring of 2020, we'll again reconvene the fiscal advisory, begin the work this spring into the fall, and work on a engagement process with their community on hearing from them what are their values, what do they prioritize, and to come up with a target for them to recommend cuts. As Chuck mentioned earlier, there are not going to be any easy cuts. I don't want to minimize the $5.8 million of cuts already made, but these are going to be more significant. These will be impact programming. These will impact things that we hold near and dear to our district. Those recommendations will be made to Dr. Topier, much like last time. She will consider that in her own professional obligation, and she will make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees, who are the only groups authorized to make those decisions with additional community input. And again, we're going to reassess options for another parcel tax campaign in a future date. We don't know what we're going to do yet. It's too soon. We haven't even gotten the final results. 58% of all school measures up and down the state failed. 58% of bonds, school measures. As our political consultant said, the political landscape in California has changed. So we don't know what that means. We have to take a step back, meet with a consultant, look at the data, and reassess on what is the next step to do on behalf of our students. The next two regular elections are in California are November 2020, which is a heartbeat away when you consider all the steps we have to take to get there, and March of 2022. That is a ways away. We'll be deficit spending throughout that time. And again, our parcel taxes expire in June of 22. That's 3 months away. 3 months away before we run out of parcel tax revenue. There are several special election dates. That's when a district or an organization calls for a special election, but we have to foot the cost for that election. That is expensive. The regular elections are the statewide and federal elections that we can kind of piggytail on. We don't bear that expense. And again, a reminder, our current parcel taxes expire in June of 22.
Corbett,
Yes.
before you go to the next slide, so November 2020, if indeed we pass a renewal only, straight renewal.
No
parcel
increase?
tax, no increase.
Yes.
We're going to be roughly $3.8 million deficit spending, because that's going to be through 2021, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And if we passed, even if we pass with an increase, as the proposed $190 was,
Yes.
we wouldn't see those extra dollars until July of 21. Is that correct? July 1st, 2021?
Correct. Because the Measure B was in March of this fiscal year, we would have received those funds for next school year. Like you said, November of 2020 is next school year.
Right.
We wouldn't receive those funds for the following year. So while it's only 8 months calendar difference, it's a full school year difference.
Measure
We need
B
to
was
clear-
in arrears, though. We did Measure B or J, sorry.
Right.
J was in arrears, and we were able to get that aside from that portion.
Correct. That was a unique carve-out that this board, or previous board, decided. So that's absolutely true. They did decide to do that, but you have to have specific language to do that. That's not the norm.
And also, I know there was an issue that the tax bills are due April 15th. And so in order to get the funding in before November, which still there's a lag time, you have to go through special measures with the county, and often it's just too cumbersome to do so. So like you're saying, it's a whole year.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lag.
Yes.
We had the lag in cash flow, but not, we can get it for, they just come in a little bit later.
Exactly. It's more of a cash flow piece as long as we have the reserve.
You can
to
get a
do that.
short-term
Exactly.
loan, basically.
But I want to answer Trustee Lopez's other question. Measure B was going to bring in $6 million additional revenue beyond our current parcel tax revenues, $6 million more. So if we went for a straight renewal as is, no increase, therefore we'd be looking to make $6 million of cuts, even if we pass a straight renewal this fall. We still would need to make $6 million of cuts facing the projection we have coming up. So, the next slide, or slides, show the proposed cuts for next school year for the board to consider. Reduce academic programming. The total of these bullet points, estimated savings of roughly $406,000 annually. Suspending the team program for next school year. We're going to hear more about that. The team program is a unique outdoor experiential ed program for 24 students at Tamalpais High School. We're going to limit elective offerings across the district, largely at our comprehensive high schools, and move to more of a wait list or lottery system. The mechanics are quite complicated, but basically, as the sub-bullet states, we're going to prioritize our financial staffing resources, our teachers, for our graduation requirements and not expand staffing for sections to accommodate electives. We have to prioritize grad requirements and not electives. That's programming. We're also proposing suspending the journalism release periods at all 3 comprehensive sites. The Bark at Redwood, the Jolly Roger at Drake, and I'm blanking on the Tamalpais News. Thank you, Kara. Thank you. Those teachers have a class, they have a release period, and a $4,000 stipend. I want to be clear on what this bullet point statement is talking about: suspending the release period, not the class, not the $4,000 stipend. The next bullet, suspending the district-wide global studies release period. We're not talking about suspending the global studies program, but there is a teacher that has one course, a release period, where his job is to coordinate all the logistics of our 7, I believe, global study field trips. He is most certainly earning his compensation with the coronavirus right now. I do want to give Brian Zalen a huge kudos for his work with Dr. Topier over the past month. He's been nothing short of extraordinary. We also want to limit students, or propose limiting students to 7-period course load. We have 7 periods in our day at our comprehensive sites. We'd be limiting them to only 7. Some students choose or are offered an 8th period or even a 9th period. We would cap that to 7 periods with 2 exceptions for those students in AVID and special education students that need an initial course to access their program.
What about 0 period?
We're not proposing eliminate a 0 period or even our 8th or 9th period, just limiting any one student to 7 periods, 7 classes, regardless of when they fall. Does that make sense? Okay. So, also, as I mentioned earlier, we have budgeted to bring back the teacher leader model. The estimated cost is $607,000. So we're proposing to suspend that again. This teacher leader model is where teachers in our district, in every department, in every school, provide some compensation to provide curriculum and instruction and assessment, professional development for all of our teachers. And then lastly, we want to further tighten teacher staffing. This is something we do every year. What's unique this year is this current year, we increased the class sizes across the board. We added 2 additional students to each class, and the idea was that is how, when many teachers retired, we didn't have to replace them all. No one was left without a job after those who voluntarily retired early were able to do that. Now that we've learned a lot about the mechanics of the staffing under that, we still project we can reduce staffing by $365,000 across the district. Again, I want to note that these budget cuts, all the proposed ones, and this slide and the previous slide, total up to $1.4 million. Even with that, and some staff compensation raise next year, our deficit next year will be $3 million. So we would still need to cut $1.6 million potentially, even to break even next year. And that has nothing to do with the parcel tax expiration in a couple of years. Those programming cuts would be brought through the Fiscal Advisory Committee once the board gives guidance to us and Dr. Topier on what the target level for cuts are, pending any potential parcel tax measure revenue increase. So I'm not going to read this. This is just a conclusion for those that aren't able to attend that summarizes a lot of the bullet points. For those that will read this, post it to our website in the next day or so. And quickly, budget calendar and key dates. Again, we're here in March. In May, we have the governor's May revised budget proposal. If the board should choose this evening, an agenda item coming up to notice, a preliminary notice of layoff for any teachers related to this proposal, we have to follow up by May 15th to formally notify that will indeed happen or will not happen, to give that teacher some certainty whether they need to indeed look for a job elsewhere or not. And again, in June, we need to adopt a budget for next year, an LCAP. As of now, it's unlikely we're able to self-certify as positive in June. We will have to likely submit a qualified or negative budget to the Board of Trustees to adopt, given that the third year of the multi-year projection will not have $17 million of revenue.
So I would like to open it up to the trustees, and it might be helpful if you get ready to pull the slides back. I guess
Sure,
that's Mary.
I'm ready to go.
'Cause I know that there's a lot of clarifying questions.
Please.
And we've all gotten emails from the community, and so we all have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to open it up.
And everyone, please speak right into the microphone so that everyone outside as well. Mr. Sondheim?
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have one quick question. So I think somewhere in there it said that one of the recommendations, if the partial tax fails, was to reconvene the Fiscal Advisory Committee
Yes,
in
right here.
school year 20. So that's next school year, but we need to identify. Well, but we're not in the 2021 school year. That starts in the fall.
I think what that's mentioning is we'd start the work this spring.
In
We
the
don't want to wait
spring.
to the fall, but
Yeah,
we need.
the school year 2020-21 starts in the fall.
We met
I wanna
12
make sure
times
that-
last time.
Okay.
We want to kick it off, but we'll need to
So the
continue that through the
calendar
fall.
year. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Just Measure B was the first time
Put your microphone.
Measure B was the first time we've had a parcel tax not passed in this district, correct?
That is correct.
And
Since
we're-
1989, the district has had a parcel tax.
Right. And I think, as former trustee Ford pointed out, we're fortunate to live in a district with great schools, with great teachers, and I think we need to keep perspective. And 62% was not the 2/3 that we needed, but was not that far off. And so I think looking at this, yes, we want to have fiscal discipline, but also just watch the program as well and maintain the education that everyone expects here.
I have a general question, and I think, for instance, I received an email from someone asking whether we considered looking at our athletic programs. You know, the focus was on reducing some of the journalism support, I'll call it, because it wasn't really clear at first. So the email asked, the person writing the email asked, well, why journalism? Why did you look at that release period? And have you thought of athletics? So I was wondering if you could comment on that process.
Sure. The proposed cuts before the board this evening were a byproduct of what came out of last year's fiscal advisor committee. Ultimately, the proposed cuts this evening were not on last year's fiscal advisor committee recommendation for $3 million of cuts that the board acted upon, but these recommendations were very much in the conversation and the next layer that were potentially to be considered. So given that the parcel tax measure was on March 3rd, we just got the results a few days later, and we have a statewide deadline that we must take action on or before March 15th, statewide. That is an extremely compressed window. We didn't have time to reconvene a large committee. Therefore, we need to lean on the fiscal advisory work from last year and at least provide some options this evening for the board to consider. We'll obviously need to do much more cuts to programming in the future, but that's something we'll take the time, like Ms. Ronish mentioned, to meet the spring and throughout the fall once we get direction from the board of a future parcel tax measure, what increase we may or may not. Again, we have $6 million of additional revenue that Measure B would have provided. We can't account for that anymore.
I have a question about release periods. So we're talking about release periods for journalism program and the global studies programs.
Correct.
Surely there are other release periods
Yes, there are.
for other programs.
Yes, sir.
Will we look at those as well, and what kind of financial impact in a positive way in terms of a cut to our budget, a savings to our budget, would that be? Do you have an idea?
So, and I'm going to correct, I believe we have 14 release periods across our district currently. We're bringing forward a proposal this evening to potentially cut 4 of them, 3 in journalism, the global studies. That means there's 10 others out there. A release period is like the cost of a class. The average cost of a class or a release period is $30,000 a year. So if that's a direction the board would like us to look into, we can certainly bring that back as well if you want us to look at release periods globally.
And with the proposed cuts that total 406,000, you talked about remembering the number in terms of the.
I'm sorry, Dan, where are you?
So the proposed cuts that you've identified.
Oh, yes.
To the academic program of 406,000. You talked about the budget for this year ending up 252,000 better than was expected in December.
Correct.
And how that goes to the reserves. Given that there's only a difference of 150,000 between those two numbers, that is 250,000 going into reserves, more for this year, and only savings here of 406,000. Was there any thought of using that extra surplus this year to offset some of this and to continue some of these programs for the year while we pursue another parcel tax in November? I mean, the other expense savings on 45 then seem to be much less in the way of program, but sort of larger class sizes, yes, but continuing programs there.
Yeah, that's a fair consideration. The swing of $250,000 for the better. I don't want to minimize that, especially in light of what we're talking about tonight. I wish I could look in the crystal ball and say that $250,000 was going to happen in the first place, or would happen again between now and June. I just don't know. There's a reason we do a budget adoption, a first interim, a second interim. Things changed. Lars and I did not predict that the pool boilers would almost explode, that we had an elevator. Unexpected things happen. Unexpected good things happen. Our special ed costs are going down because of reduce. I just don't have the crystal ball. It could continue, or it could swing in the other direction.
And just to clarify, that's only 406,000. We have to cut 3 million.
If we want to have a balanced budget next school year,
Yes.
and we gave some staff compensation, we're projecting we will have a $3 million operating deficit next year. This represents $1.4 million of cuts.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, Kara.
Could you possibly explain just exactly how the waitlist system or lottery system plays out?
I think that might be the next agenda item. Is that correct? No?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Tara, do you want to take this one?
So the way a
that. I thought you were-
priority that works is that, if there was just one section allocated to a certain elective class and say 42 kids signed up, you would prioritize seniors. So you would first fill it with seniors, and then if there were spaces still left over, you would do a lottery system with juniors next, and then Usually what you do in that system is the juniors who don't get in get priority the following year.
And I just want to, and I know it's probably sounding like beating a dead horse, but if you're not involved in education, you might not understand the release period. And I want to really clarify this because there was some misunderstandings going around in some emails that we were receiving as board members and claiming that eliminating the release period for journalism meant that journalism was being canceled, and that we were not representing student voices, that we were canceling the papers and the publications at each school. And the elimination of the release period means that the journalism teacher would teach 5 classes instead of teaching 4 classes, plus having a free period that is dedicated to time that they spend outside of the school day in the journalism program. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then also the journalism teachers additionally get a $4,000 stipend on top of the period, and that also represents time spent outside the classroom for the paper or the magazines.
That's correct.
And that's calculated, and our hourly rate for additional duties for teachers is $50 an hour. So the $4,000 stipend covers 80 hours outside of the regular teaching day.
$4,000 divided by $50 per hour equals 80 total hours of compensation. Correct.
Okay, because I think that's really important for the audience to understand before you come up and make comments, is what the parameters are of things that are on the potential, right? No decisions have been made, but the potential. And then similarly, the team recommendation is for suspension of team, or it's not even a recommendation, but a item that we're discussing tonight is for suspension of team for a year. It is not elimination of the program forever going forward.
Correct.
Okay. And the team program, well, we can talk about that when we get the details. Thanks.
Students?
So just to clarify, with the 7-period course load, say like I take yearbook as an 8th period, if I still wanted to continue that class next year, I would be forced to take a whole, like a free period during the day?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Or
You're
kinda do something
Tamalpais,
like
so
that.
maybe no first period or no
7th
fifth period?
Yeah, okay. So just take a free, like many upperclassmen do, to replace that extra class outside of school.
Everyone will be provided 7 classes, regardless of when they meet before or
Okay.
after school, with those 2 noted exceptions.
And that's like the Advid PE before school?
Yeah,
Oh, awesome.
exactly. Yep. Thank you. Lauren?
I know right now students are only allowed to have, yes, sorry. I know right now students are only allowed to have 20 credits for classes they take outside of school. So are you looking to expand that now that it's a 7-period day?
So the 20 credits is towards graduation requirements. So students can take as many credits as they want outside of class that are elective, outside of the district that are elective. But that would be a
So more
board
would
recommendation.
be added to the graduation requirements.
Right now, the board would have to decide if they wanted to consider increasing those credits that could go towards graduation requirements.
And Corbett, did you look at the numbers in terms of the savings for going to a 6-period day rather than 7-period day would be fairly significant. Did you look at those numbers? What would that mean in terms of keeping classes but reducing what each student could take there? And I guess given that is that a measure then to consider sort of in the future, given that November being 8 months away at this point, when we presumably will have another parcel tax on the ballot at that point, and then can evaluate what the funding will be.
So just clarify, I understand, but I want to make sure the audience understands. Heard you ask, did you look into or have you considered or quantify what the cost savings would be if we went from a 7-period schedule across our district to a 6-period schedule, which is the norm across the state. Students are allowed to take 6 classes, not the 7-period schedule we have in the TAM district, not even to mention the 8th or 9th period or 0 period. Unfortunately, yes, I have looked at that. I was racking my brain over this past weekend of if Measure B fails, which it did, how are we going to account for that $6 million cut? I've been thinking of things we wouldn't want to think about. Programming is what we have left. Unfortunately, the only thing I can think of that comes close to that $6 million equation is indeed that. If you look at the total FTE we have across our district, 292 FTE divided by 7, going from a 7-period to 6-period day, that's roughly 40 FTE. You multiply the 40 FTE full-time teachers times the average compensation of $145,000. I think that's $6.08 million. That's the only thing I can think of across the board that would systematically balance our budget. And that that's something that is dire that we do not want to explore, but I think that is unfortunately something we have to consider until we know where the community support level is in a future tax measure. Dan, did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about in terms of just where we are overall, and that if we'll have much more clarity on the financial situation post-November, and assuming we can get something passed at that point, we then can plan, and if it obviously doesn't go through, then it's a different sort of plan.
Yeah, Dan, to your point, it's about the $6 million. If we do a straight renewal, no increase, then we need to cut $6 million. If we do split the difference, a half increase, then that's a $3 million increase, then we have to cut $3 million. So ultimately, what's going to guide, in Dr. Topia and my thinking, the fiscal advisory cuts next year, the target amount of cuts, is going to be what's the difference between what the board decides to propose on Measure X in November at a future date. Whatever additional revenue that is, the difference has to be made up in cuts to add up to the $6 million difference that Trustee Lopica was speaking to. Yep.
So purposes of this agenda item, and I'm not suggesting we take action now. We want to hear public comment. I just want to be very clear. We're approving the interim budget as a positive certification.
Yes.
The other issues we discussed.
Sorry, right? That's all we're doing this evening, right now.
But what I want to also clarify is what part of the discussion is public comment now. We have a lot of people here that are here to talk about team. Team was discussed in this agenda item, even though we're not taking action. Where that's reflected is in the follow-on agenda item, but specifically team is not called out, but we know why they're not. It's more of a bumping exercise. So I just want to make sure I have agreement with the board that we do entertain comments about team here. We're not making a decision because technically team's not on the next one. What? Right. I just wanted to first get team. We'll also talk about journalism and any of the other items that we saw up here. So it might be helpful to have them up for the audience.
Sure. These 2 slides.
Right.
Sure.
Okay, very good. So before, I'm going to let you, do you have a question? I'll let you speak. No, you changed your mind? No, I'm back. Oh, okay. Okay, great, thank you. So what we're going to do now is get prepared for public comment. There'll be 2 minutes per commenter. If you can line up, and don't feel that you have to get up if the line is long. I'm not going to stop the line at any point. We'll just have more people file in. And I'd like to start off by saying thank you for bringing in the yellow slips. Can everyone please let me know when you're ready, because I can't talk over you. I'll just wait till they get lined up, I guess.
We have a team organized for parent speeches tonight. We have the.
Right, they said they want to hear from Shane first.
We're open to, but let's keep them together. How many speeches has journalism prepared? 5 already. Okay. So Eric, I have the order. I got Eric, then Selena, then Chris. So let's get in our order. Eric, Selena, Chris, Hudson, then Lenny, Hudson, and then Zozo, Lenny.
Okay, I'm not nervous. Dude, make him cry. Okay, you guys, realize you have 2 minutes.
I know, Diana cut a bunch of mine off because I timed mine and mine was 3 minutes. I don't know.
Just, you should be okay.
I was worried about it.
Can I please have your attention? Can you please stop talking so that we can get started? Please listen carefully. I understand we have quite a few people outside, and because of the number of people in this room, when you're completed your public comment, please go outside and allow another person to come in so that they can make a comment. Also, I'll be reminding the trustees as well as those of you at the microphone, be very close to the microphone. It sounds like it's incredibly frustrating outside because they cannot hear. Again, you'll be given 2 minutes, and please identify yourself before you start speaking. I want to thank you for bringing the yellow slips. It's helpful for after the meeting. If you haven't filled one out, it'd be greatly appreciated, but it's not required. So we're now opening to public comment. Mary is ready with the 2 minutes. And again, as I mentioned before, I'm going to have to be pretty firm about the 2 minutes, and we'll even unplug the microphone if we have to. So we'll wait until we're sure Mary is ready so that we get the timing right. So thank you for coming, and I really appreciate you speaking to us. Can you please identify yourself?
Yeah, my name is Eric Best. I'm a team teacher. President and members of the board, thank you very much. What I know is that education is all about having a team. It is many moving parts acting as one. Teachers and administrators creating distinct and exciting learning opportunities every day, and hoping every student is engaged in a memorable education. There are also school boards that must make decisions and rarely get credit for the hard choices and impact that impact student learning on a larger scale. I don't envy the difficulty that sits in front of you today, and for that I'm sorry. What I do know is that tonight you have the chance to be the hero. You have a program that sits before you with a legacy and history that transcends students, teachers, and administrators. A program that's different than almost every other program in every other school district in the country. A program that excites the entire community. This is my first year teaching in team, and I thought I knew what to expect. I thought that the best part of the program would be the trips. I quickly learned that's not the truth. The best part of the program is when a student says things like, "I never liked school till I found team," or "I can't wait to get to school today," or when a student comes back from their internships knowing what they want to do with their lives. These are statements of personal growth that members of the community yearn to hear from kids. This is what makes the team program special. It creates space for students to grow into who they are and to feel comfortable and safe being real. All teachers talk about differentiating education for each student and the importance of getting to know your students on a more personal level. While all teachers strive for this ideal, it is difficult with the constraints created by the traditional teaching structure. Team, through its rich history, has cultivated these ideas and has created real change in students and educators. Team is one of those programs that teachers, students, parents, administrators, and board members are proud of having in their district. Team is successful in the education of students and helps to develop the whole student, including rigorous college prep classes like English, math, and history, and life skill classes like wilderness medicine, leadership, and internships. Please give us time to find another solution that does not involve suspending a successful educational program that has been around for over a quarter century. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Very, very close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can we restart the timer? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. One moment.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Selena Marmolejo, and I'm so grateful to be a part of Team. This year has been the best year of my life. Back at Redwood, I used to skip class all the time because I never had anything or anyone that motivated me to want to go to class. My vice principal once told me that my attendance sheet looked like a Christmas tree from the amount of unexcused absences that I had. Now I can assure you that my attendance sheet would look like the dullest Christmas tree you have ever seen before. Because I want to go to school, and I want to learn. Team has allowed me to form real connections that genuinely mean something. I can feel the love and care my teachers have for me. Growing up, I had a very violent and troubled childhood. My dad left me and my family when I was 9, and from that point on, he was always in and out of my life. I had so much pain and anger towards my dad, but I still loved him. I had a vision that one day my dad and I would talk, and I could let him know how much he hurt me. Unfortunately, that conversation never happened. This past September, my dad passed away. I had an empty feeling in my heart because the relationship I had with with my dad felt like a book that I never got to finish. So many unread chapters. I was in a dark place, but team helped fill the void in my heart. I know that if I was still at Redwood this year, it would have been extremely difficult for me to come out of that dark place in my mind. 2 days after my dad's funeral, my team class left for our first backpacking trip in the Sierras. I had so much time to think and to appreciate the beauty and nature all around me. Team has helped me realize that there's so much more to life than my own problems. Team has taught me to be more open-minded and to appreciate everything and everyone around me. It has given life a new purpose for me. It has given me the opportunity to experience a different way of living life. It is incredible to think that all I need to survive can fit into one backpack. I have developed an unexplainable bond with my classmates. We are a family. This program is a hidden gem, and I am eternally grateful to have had the opportunity to be a part of it. It would be an injustice to our community to deprive future generations from all this program has taught and shown me. I belong here, in team, where I feel most comfortable.
Thank you. I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
You know what you could do? I will. And I really appreciate the enthusiasm. I just hope that we can limit it a little bit so that we can really spend time and listen for a long time. But thank you. And thank you, Celine. Celine was your name, right? Selena, I'm sorry. But thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
All right,
yes.
Hello, my name is Hudson Guerrero. I thank you for giving me the chance to speak tonight. I've had a life full of ups and downs. I could stand up here all night and tell you my life story, but instead I will talk to you about how my life has done a full 180 after joining team. I was at Redwood my freshman year and couldn't even get myself to class. I was so depressed. I'd go to the park and sit on the swings every day and cry. I had a group of friends, but I was the outcast, the weird one. Joining team gave me a home, somewhere to be myself, be happy with who I am. I came to Tamalpais sophomore year and struggled to keep myself in the CEC. I went to bed every night crying and wondering when this would end. Not the school year, not my depression, but my life. I remember having to come to school every day with long sleeves to hide the cuts that covered both my arms. In my mind, this was the way my life was going to be. I was given the idea to apply for team by my amazing counselor, Kimberly. I didn't apply for the idea of an outdoor experience, but for a family. I've gotten that family and so much more. I get up in the mornings now and look forward to school. I want to see my classmates and I love my teachers and think of them like parents. I come to them for some things I don't even come to my own parents for. Of course, I still have my ups and downs, but my progress in grades, attendance, mental health, and so much more has skyrocketed to limits I never thought I would get to. I remember replying to a girl freshman year when she asked why I never showed up to school. I simply replied, because I don't plan on living long enough to graduate. I had no plan to live past high school. Now look where I am, happy, active, and having the will to live. This is all due to team. This is a place I want generation after generation to experience the chance of a lifetime. Who knows how many more lives will be saved by this program. This program has saved my life. I know that there are other students struggling the same way I have, and taking away this program would be a disservice to ourselves and future students.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Lenny Gucciardi. I taught for the last 6 years in the team program and retired. I was also on the finance committee last year, so I know the numbers quite well. Team program is on the chopping block because of cost. There are 1.6 teachers for 24 students. If the program is cut, those 1.6 teachers go away, but the 24 students must be taught by others at a cost of roughly 0.8 of a teacher. Cutting team saves 0.8 of a teacher. Team raises money to fund all of its backpacking and climbing gear, trip leaders, and transportation. There are no other savings besides the 0.8. The language that is being used to suspend the team program. The team program, if the team program does not run next year, it will die. Partly that's due to the relationships that will be severed with organizations such as Pacific Leadership Institute and its ropes course, the ranger districts with we work, the internships for our students, the community service organizations that depend on us. The other reason that the program will die is that it is essential to have at least one of the teachers with at least 2 years of experience in the program to manage all of the complexity around trip planning and execution without undue risk for our students. One of the reasons I retired at the end of last year was that my co-teacher, Diana, the best teacher I've ever worked with, then had 2 years of experience and was now capable of being the senior person in the program. If the program is suspended, Diana, who lives in Oakland and has a passion for teaching underserved youth, will not commute to TUHSD to teach. So be careful. Suspending something makes you feel better, but it will mean the end of the team program. I urge you to give it another year before you make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you identify yourself, please?
Chris
Thank you.
Ford.
Thank you.
Every kid comes to team differently. Spring semester of freshman year, my son got mono. The viral infection everyone loves to snicker about forced him out of school for 6 weeks, wreaking havoc on his academic momentum. Beyond the academic hardships brought on by his illness, our bright, happy son had grown angsty and moody. Whatever TAM wasn't working for him. An old soul, he wasn't connecting with the structure of the classes, classwork, or campus life. No offense to TAM, but a 1,500-person campus just isn't for everyone. I wouldn't say our son was lost, but he was also definitely not found. Cut to junior year, somehow my wife and her infinite sleuthing had discovered the district's team program. Cole loved backpacking in the outdoors. By some grace, he was accepted. My time here is short, so I won't waste it with a detailed account of the magical junior year my son had in team. I won't go into his community service and time spent improving trails on Mount Tam or his eye-opening volunteer internship at a local business. I won't go deep into how he and all his classmates learned how to raise money for all their trips and how they created practical real-world budgets for their trail food while somehow navigating the complex organizational politics of sharing Nutella. Here's the really important thing I want to convey. Shortly after finishing his junior year, he told me team is where he found himself. I don't know how many of you have kids, and if you do, how old they are or where they are in that life. But to hear a teenage boy in this day and age in this weird, wealthy, angst-heavy community we live in have the confidence to say out loud he's found himself, well, it made my heart burst. Not so much because I couldn't believe it, but because, ironically, I already knew. The minute Cole stepped off the van after his first trip to the wilderness with his teachers and classmates 9 months earlier, the genius and unrivaled beauty of this program was written all over his face, in his beaming smile, in the lightness of his spirit, and most importantly, in the joyful absence of all that angst. Team taught us a lot. It taught us every kid has a different path, and having access to those paths, however small or limited that access may be, can change a kid's life. I'm not sure why everyone gets into education, but this seems like a pretty good reason.
Thank you very much for your comment. Good evening. Can you identify yourself? Why don't you put the mic down? Thanks very much.
My name is Zomina Peterson. In the years before I did team, I forgot why I loved to learn. I felt an enormous pressure and couldn't understand why I spent so much time doing work that felt disconnected from the real world. I'd lost a lot of confidence, and I was letting my anxieties govern my life. If I had stayed in this environment for much longer, I would have struggled to lift myself back up. I would have continued to isolate myself, and I would have become increasingly angry at the education system for failing to inspire me. I would have not gained the strength and bravery to step into the world after high school with the skills I need as an adult. Every single student in my class came into team because they felt as if they had nowhere else to go. There were students who were convinced they would never succeed in school, students who felt completely socially isolated, students who had been through immense trauma, students who had struggled in a conventional classroom but didn't have the economic means to attend a private school. All of us came out of team having gained confidence in all aspects of our lives. Now imagine the number of lives changed from every team class since the program began in 1990. Imagine the countless lives that could be changed by team in the future. Team students are receiving a completely different education than any other students in the district. They're being taught real-life skills, from wilderness medicine to budgeting. They're also required to serve the community for a total of 54 hours. As stated on the TAM district website, team students have provided approximately 33,000 hours, equal to 16 full work years of service to more than 200 agencies. And all of this is integrated into engaging Common Core classes that make sure every student is prepared for their next steps academically. Every single student deserves an education like this, one that leaves no student behind and lifts us up rather than weighing us down. Team should be the poster child for education everywhere. If such a privileged district as this one doesn't see the importance of preserving programs such as Team, I have little hope for the rest of the country to fix an education system that continues to fail its students.
Thank you very much. Okay. Good evening. Can you identify yourself, please? Thank you.
Mike Levinson, I'm a teacher at TAM. I'm also a proud parent of a team student, Keely, sitting in the front row.
Very nice.
And I'm very grateful for the year that Diana and Eric and our district leadership have given Keely in the team program. It's been wonderful in many ways. I'm sorry we're in this position. I know you are too. As a teacher at TAM, I write recommendations for sophomores every other year to attend the team program, and I'm always excited that they're interested. And unanimously, I've been so impressed with the success of the students who go to the program. They leave, they might be struggling, they might have some challenges they're facing, or they might be strong students, and they always come back stronger academically, mentally and emotionally, and that's pretty impressive. When I run into team students at TAM who've come back from team, or who are concurrently at team, attending both schools, I am constantly struck that they love school, and that's powerful to hear from a high school student, and really important. When I first started working in the district, I taught at Tamascal and San Andreas in the alternative programs, and I was always struck by Chuck Ford's passion for the program. But then I was even more struck by Patchen and Nicole, and then Lenny and Diana and Eric, and how they were able to build the program and continue to provide such an outstanding service for kids. Team is a program as part of Tamascal, but it's really a school, and all the alumni, for many of the alumni, it's the most meaningful component of their education. And so I would encourage you to give the alumni, the teachers, the current students a chance to see what they could do to address the financial needs of team as we move forward. And let's see if we can let the program continue.
Thank you for your comments.
All right.
Appreciate that. Good evening. You'll want to put the mic closer. Perfect.
I'm Aisling Hennessy. I would firstly like to thank you for taking the time out of your meeting to hear what we have to say. It is extremely difficult to summarize in 3 minutes a program that has single-handedly changed the course of my life. When I moved to this country during my sophomore year from a small farming town in Ireland, I was incredibly overwhelmed by the large population at Tam High. I developed a severe panic disorder that had a huge impact on my grades and an even bigger impact on my spirit. My family soon witnessed me fade into a shadow of myself. I vividly remember coming home from the first day of my junior year in team to my parents anxiously awaiting news. As I began to speak, there was a look of relief on their faces because for the first time in almost a year, I was smiling. I had the opportunity to do 3 iconic backpacking trips in the mountains, desert, and California coast, places that many of my old friends could only dream of seeing. Our wilderness medicine class inspired me to become an EMT and hopefully soon a paramedic. Most importantly, my time in team introduced me to my teachers, Lenny and Diana. They believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They showed me that I can do great things if I put my mind to it, whether that is getting up the steepest part of the Sierras or getting my grades back up, which proved to be an even bigger climb. I managed to graduate, which I can almost guarantee would not have happened had team not been a part of my life. I would not have found and started my career path, and I wouldn't have the friends that I have today. From the outside, it is easy to see the team program as just one expendable year, but alumni and their families can all describe how its legacy has continued to impact their lives years later. I understand you have difficult decisions to make. However, all I ask is that you make an informed decision. Ask questions, go on a day hike, sit in on a class. Please do not cut team without taking into account the lives it has changed, and more importantly, please consider the future lives it could continue to change.
Thank you, Ashley. Really appreciate that. Hi. Thank you.
My name is Diana Goldberg, and I'm one of the current team teachers. I can't thank you enough for listening to our stories tonight. I grew up the daughter and the granddaughter of Chicago public school teachers, and I've seen the failures of our education system to raise money and meet the mental health needs of everyone. And I found the most hope in my educational career finding TAM Union and finding Tamaskel and the TEAM program. This program is the revolution in education everyone needs. TEAM is much more than a backpacking program. We are a school within a school offering rigorous academics, community service, internships, and outdoor learning for an entire year of life. For many years, TEAM has been on the first items to be cut in this district because of old reputations of who we are and who we serve. Through our lottery system in the last 7 years, we now serve percentage-wise a more diverse population than the rest of the district. And I invite everyone here tonight to take a look at who we are and what we do, and to know to suspend us is to cut us. It is very hard for a program like ours to come back from that. What many don't see in our program is students who've been lost, finding themselves and believing that they are worthy of love and belonging. They don't see students that are serving meals to the homeless in Glide Memorial in San Francisco. They don't see the day in and day out rigorous academics. They do not see students excited to go to school on the weekends to fundraise and to work on wilderness medicine. They don't see teenagers willing to get up at 4 a.m. to go to Indigenous Peoples Day and learn about the native lands we walk on. And they don't see a family of young people learn to love each other and believe in each other. And they definitely don't see the metaphorical mountains students can climb after they've climbed literal ones. So to cut TEAM or to suspend TEAM tonight is to give up on what makes our district unique. It's not in another elective class or release period. It is a school within a school. I ask you, I implore you to come, sit with us, walk with us, and be part of our program before you let us go.
Thank you for your comment. Good evening. You'll want to put the microphone up very high. Thank you. If you could put the microphone right next to your mouth, that would be great. Thank you, and you can introduce yourself. Is that what we're doing? Oh, yeah, I thought, let's let the people leave that are leaving, and then we can start again. I think we're having a change out. Change in and out, yeah. Yeah. So we'll wait one moment for the people that are coming back in to find a seat. If you're coming in, please rush to the front and sit down so we can get started. Please don't stand in the back talking. Can you sit down so I know if we can start again? Are there other people outside trying to get in to make a comment about TEAM? Okay, so I think we're going to get started. So anyone coming in, please try and keep your voices down, and if you could find a seat, that'd be even better. Thank you. Good evening. Now you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
My name is Jack Watson. I'm a junior at Redwood and a copy editor for the Redwood Bark. I just want to start off by saying that ultimately both us and you guys are on the same team, and that we both want what is best for Redwood and the TAM community. And because of that, we feel very strongly that journalism should not be one of the first programs that is targeted by these budget cuts. If you look at the current state of journalism in our country today, it is constantly being attacked and sort of branded as fake news. And if the community were to cut aspects of journalism, what message does that send about how we prioritize free speech and the importance of freedom of the press? And at the Bark, we really strive to uphold those principles of journalism, which are advocating for those who can't advocate for themselves, communicating and informing with the community, and holding people accountable. And just in the past, we've written a ton of really incredible and fantastic articles that have upheld those goals. We've recently, last year, there was a story about sex trafficking in the Bay Area, which is something that a lot of people are completely unaware of. We recently, last cycle, we had a story about the importance, or rather, and how there's not enough racial diversity among teachers, among our Redwood. And if you go way back, we were one of the only organizations that had a picture of the Max Wade trial. And it just goes to show that our organization, we really strive to uphold those principles of journalism. And if we were to lose those release periods and lose that time, it is made immensely more difficult to uphold those aspects of journalism. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay. Good evening. If you could identify yourself and hold the mic very close to your mouth. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Drake Goodman. I'm a current editor-in-chief for the Redwood Bark. And first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for taking on this burden. I know it's very difficult, and when you're going through the list of the budget, obviously the journalism release period is something that pops up. But I just want you to think for a moment first what you think you're cutting by cutting that release period. Because the truth of the matter is that the Redwood Bark wouldn't be the bark without that period. And what it really boils down to, in my perspective, is the lack of what we're losing is time and resources. So in terms of time, right now the bark meets during 5th period, 6th period, and then we have that release period during 7th period. And during that period, the editors-in-chief meet with the advisor to plan the lessons for the entire week and going forward. That is when the advisor can meet with students in order to address any issues. That gives the students a time to go to the classroom, edit, to address legal problems, to help one another. And it also gives students access to resources they wouldn't have otherwise, because there is that open classroom with an advisor there to help. And those resources are essential, essentially, to our program and also to developing the skills of these students. And if the release period is cut, then obviously we won't have access to the classroom at that time. We won't have access to our advisor, who really instructs us on how to progress and really makes this a student-run organization. And the problem that we're seeing is that this release period, this is really the backbone of how we run the Redwood Bark. This is what makes us function. And we also have our pay stubs starting during this release period. So obviously that will be affected. Some other people will likely speak about that. But what I'm saying is, obviously this is very difficult for everyone, but this is going to be very detrimental to the quality of our publication.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question. One moment.
Yes.
You spoke of the release period being 7th period. Is that every single day of the week, or how many times a week?
Yeah, so that is every single day of the week for Redwood. We have...
So every
5
days a week? 5 days?
So 4 days. When we have 7th period.
Okay,
let me clarify. When we have 7th period.
So 4 hours a week.
Yes, well, an hour and a half on one day. So yeah, so
Okay,
it's 4.5
thank you.
hours.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. If you could identify yourself and hold the mic very close to your mouth. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rye Wang, and I'm a senior, and I'm also an editor-in-chief of the Redwood Bark. So I just want to be realistic here with my time, because we're aware that cuts do need to be made. And but what we take issue with is the fact that we're targeting solely the journalism release periods in the district. Some solutions or alternatives that we can offer include consolidating similar programs such as leadership and link crew. With the proposal of limiting students to a 7-period day, many underclassmen will not be able to take leadership because they have to take their other core requirements. With the probable significant decrease in leadership enrollment, we think that it would also make sense to limit the release periods that leadership teachers get. From personal experience, I have been involved with student government and leadership all 4 years at Redwood, and I've been to the leadership release periods 3 times in my 4 years. Once to pick up keys for the student store, once to return the keys to the student store, and once to find out if I won an ASB election. We suggest limiting the 2 release periods that the leadership teachers get to 0 or 1. And the reality is that from my firsthand experience, the journalism release period is a much more beneficial time for students and is essential for the program compared to the other release periods in my other classes. Furthermore, we would like a compromise as to not lose all release periods for journalism classes. We recommend that there be semi-cuts to release periods across the board so that all programs receive 1 to 2 release periods each week instead of the 4 we get. By spreading the burden across programs, which include leadership, it allows journalism at our school to maintain the quality content that we publish. It's not the money, it's the time, in the form of a release period, that is essential to the backbone of the program to reflect and plan with our advisor, which helps to continue the integrity of our program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Audrey Hedelman, and I'm a senior at Redwood, and I'm the head copy editor for the Redwood Bark.
So first, what I'd like to start off with is basically that this release period, although it doesn't seem like much, it constitutes 1/3 of our time budget, and the cut would amount to less than 0.1% of the entire school's budget. So we don't believe that this change is equitable to the Redwood Bark, and as we were saying, this period constitutes so much of what makes our program great. So next year, I'll be attending a university to study journalism, and the reason I'm choosing this was mainly due to the great program I was able to experience through Redwood Bark. And of course, the skills that we learned through PayStup, through Adobe InDesign and Photoshop were essential to a job market that's increasingly competitive. But in addition, that release period allows the editors-in-chief to plan in-class discussions that are essential to our learning and to showing us how important journalism is in this community. So, for example, we recently got to tour the Media Center at San Quentin, and after that we had 2 days to research articles about how media interacts with criminal justice. In addition, we have frequent presentations by BARC members. This allows us to have time to expand our leadership skills. Additionally, we have news briefings about once a week, and that really expands how informed of citizens we can be. And by losing this release period, we'll be keeping the what of the Redwood Bark by allowing us to continue printing in paper, but we'll be losing a lot of the why of what makes this program so important. And so for that reason, this release period is essential to keeping our program at the high level that it is. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Erin Schneider. I am the advisor of the Redwood Bark and the last person, I think, to speak on the Redwood Bark's behalf. I've appreciated my release period as a time for a very rare face-to-face communication in an otherwise whirlwind day, especially here at Redwood, where we have 45-minute periods instead of a double block during the week. So without it, I could text, I could email, and we could piece together a background plan with the Barkies each night virtually. But that 45-minute 4 times a week allows us to create the backbone of the publication. And it's also a time for the entire program, nonfiction and the Redwood Bark, to come in to discuss ethical questions with me. Today we just discussed something that could have been quite libelous going to print, to get camera help and equipment training. They get edits from their peers, from me during that time, and I also meet with my senior staff writers who are taking on huge projects. None of that can I do during an actual class period. So for the future of solid journalism training, I'm asking for time over compensation. That release period is the time to ensure what students do is informed and that it's debated and that it's agreed upon before publishing. And I'd like to invite anyone here to come see what we do during our 7th period and to come to our PayStup as well, which is happening on Monday all night until about 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So thank you for your time and for your consideration. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Hi, my name is Melissa
You
Shard.
might want to, if you can lean forward, or you can even pull the mic out.
Hi, my name is Melissa Shard, and I'm a journalist for Drake's Jolly Roger. And when I entered my junior year of high school, I signed up for Drake's journalism program, anticipating the final product of what would be my hard work. 2 months after joining the class, I had published many articles on the journalism program's website, yet the satisfaction I felt from my work online didn't compare to the emotions I felt when holding the Jolly Roger. Quite frankly, I felt so many emotions: pride, glee, excitement. I nearly cried. With the failure of Measure B, the excitement I once had for the print copy of the Jolly Roger has dissipated into a feeling of hopelessness. It is true that we can publish all of our journalism online, but the print issue of every program offers opportunities that are difficult to find elsewhere. Where else in Marin are teenagers able to experience working for a legitimate publication? Along with that, students develop work ethics through the program that aid their academic career. The print issue is truly the closest experience to a white-collar job students can get. To publish stories and print publications that will continue to win awards, our schools need time. That's what the release period does for our students. Release periods provide us with the time to develop a solid work ethic. They help us advance our writing skills for future English classes, college essays, or job applications. They allow us to create a print issue that showcases what each and every one of us love to do, whether that's to write, take photos, illustrate, or design. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate that.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Stephanie Ujika, and I am the current editor-in-chief of Drake's Jolly Roger. For context, over the last year, the Jolly Roger has completely revitalized their entire program. Myself and the rest of leadership have completely redesigned everything, putting in hundreds of hours into creating this, into creating specifically the print issue, which is what is at stake in this issue. So over the last year, the Jolly Roger has become not only an elective, not only a program, not only a student paper, it has become a community. For many of us, journalism is a way for us to be connected to our school, to be part of a community that respects and values them. Trustees, you are looking at the world's future leaders, activists, and journalists. Without the Jolly Roger, we lose an incredibly important program that provides us with a path to becoming these leaders and journalists. I am terrified that the cutting of the print publication will lead to the Jolly Roger ending. And that will deny many of this school's aspiring journalists and leaders what they need to succeed. Trustees, the staff of the Jolly Roger, Tam News, and Redwood Bark have dedicated hours upon hours of work to producing quality student journalism to the district. We receive no pay for this work. We do it as a service to the community. All we ask of you is to support that work by not cutting our funding. That's it. I understand that the failure of Measure B means that something must be cut, but I ask you today, with my staff behind me and many more back home, whether this committee considers journalism to be the least important program. Because by voting yes, that is the message you are sending across the school, district, and community. If you value student journalism and the work of the Jolly Roger, Bark, or the Tam News, then please vote against cutting release periods. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And I want to make one clarification. We're not voting tonight on getting rid of any journalism. We're not even voting on the release periods tonight. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
I understand that.
Good.
I just said as a general comment.
Okay, just want to make sure everyone's clear. Thank you. Next commenter, please.
Hi, I'm John Weller. I'm the journalism advisor at the Jolly Roger. I'm also a parent of a teamie, student in team. An email was sent out to board members asking questions from one of the TAM News students. I got it on my text. And the email was responded to with an email that said, "We're very sorry that brackets, your program here, unbracket, is being cut. That is a shame. We're really sorry. We know we have to make cuts and that affects students greatly. And so we apologize for cutting your program here, or voting on it, or putting it on the docket." I can't remember the exact language. And the student wrote back and said, "Did you mean to put brackets, your program here?" And the person on the board replied, "Yes, I did." Because there are programs, and you can ask me questions later, there are programs that everybody has that are their favorites. It upsets me greatly. It makes me very angry. And when I think about this, I think about things in terms of trade-offs, right? So I ask what the trade-off is. If we cut team, if we cut the release period, which allows me to spend my Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. with my students doing pay stubs, if we cut those programs, the impact is on students. That's a trade-off that I don't want to pay. But instead, maybe the email should have said something to the effect, and I'm very angry. The email should have said something to the effect of, "We're sorry that we're having to cut your administrator here," or "We're sorry we're having to cut your sports program here," or "We're sorry we're having to shut down the pool." But instead, it was student programs that affect students directly, not in a second or third tier. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Sky Schoenhoft, and I am one of the editors-in-chief of the TAM News, which is the largest publication in our district. Unlike some of the other publications, we run a little bit differently, and our release period is used outside of school. So, let's say that the release period is taken away. As students, this cuts our work time more than in half. We spend 20 hours worth a month in our release period outside of school creating the magazine.
We only have 15 in-class instructional hours in a month. If we tried to make up the lost hours in production time, we would have no timely content and no chance for an actual class. We would be attempting to coordinate 210 staff members across 7 classes at different times. There would be no opportunity for collaboration. If the students took it upon ourselves to create the magazine outside of class, we'd have to find a place with 20 computers loaded with InDesign and Photoshop. And this is just the student impact. We cannot maintain the quality of our publication without our advisor's supervision. Living in California, we as the students have the right to publish whatever we want without the approval from our school. Without our advisor, though, this could get us into some trouble. Our advisor uses the release period to edit articles from every one of our staff members monthly, which is around 200 articles, give or take. He's able to flag inflammatory articles, maintain our quality, and keep us out of legal trouble. Without that supervision, we don't know what will slip. The TAM News is one of the top 20 publications in this nation. We are the voices of the students, and we don't want to lose our impact. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Hi, can you put the microphone closer to you? Perfect, yeah, if you can identify yourself.
My name is Emily Stahl. I'm a features editor for the TAM News. This decision to eliminate funding toward the release period of our journalism program is not only an injustice to our district, but a contribution to the nationwide injustice towards media and news outlets. The freedom of the press is one of the foundational building blocks in a strong community. Our district is no exception. Scrapping the print publications of our schools limit the amount of outreach we can have, hence reducing the access to information for many families. This is a major problem, not only now affecting our district, but the entire country. I always considered Marin to have a progressive outlook on supporting journalism and the transparency it brings, but I guess that belief no longer applies to our school district. The TAM News has proven year after year to be a model student publication. We can see this through the awards we have hanging in our newsroom dating back to before I was even born. Why would we put a stop to it? Our print magazine not only holds the esteemed work of our writers, it contains the history of our community, documenting the greatest moments of our journey as a school district to becoming what we are today, documenting these stories in a creative way that no website could ever capture. Looking back at the archives, we can see how our style of design has evolved, how far we have come through the collaborative effort of putting together the magazine. A website simply cannot capture what our print edition has managed to do so time and time again. A website can't generate the smile our patrons have on their face when they receive our issue in the mail. My bottom line is that the point of the school district is to support and protect the growth of students in whatever passion they choose, and slashing the journalism budget not only blocks that growth for hundreds of students across the district, it blocks the growth of our community's unification. Because when it comes down to it, journalism is for the people. Our sole goal is to make sure the truth is upheld and our community gets the information and the transparency they deserve. Show me that you support our goal. Show me that you are pro-student.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, my name is Logan Little, and I'm a junior at TAM and have been a part of the TAM News for as long as I've been in high school. Ironically, I don't have the words to fully explain how important this program is in my life, but I'll try to give you an idea. I joined the TAM News as a cripplingly shy 14-year-old who didn't know the first thing about interviewing or traditional journalism writing. In the past 3 years, with instruction from our advisor and a lot of patience and advice from my peers, my writing and reporting skills have improved immeasurably. I've learned the various writing nuances behind all different types of stories and picked up skills in InDesign, Photoshop, and photography. More importantly, I think I've found my passion, and I can't thank that program enough for that. I want future students to have the same opportunities I did, and fortunately with the proposed cuts, that's just not possible, at least not to the same extent. As Sky laid out earlier, losing the release periods means losing Pay Step and thus the magazine. However, this also cuts 20 vital hours of student collaboration and learning, time which gives us a chance to put into practice the journalism curriculum we're taught in class, as well as take photos, work on InDesign, and learn to work with our peers. It also drastically limits our advisor's time to review our work, both for detrimental mistakes, but also for writing and reporting quality. Students will not reap anywhere near the same benefits I did if our release periods are cut. Yes, the journalism curriculum we're taught on a day-to-day basis is critical, but I'd argue that you can only learn to be a good journalist when you're doing the real thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. My name is Theo Kaufman. I'm the student representative for the Tam High Site Council,
and liaison for the PTSA. After carefully reviewing the proposed budget cuts, many of these seemingly arbitrarily cut essential student services, exactly the opposite of this board and district's intentions. However, though, you as a board will soon vote on increased class sizes, suspension of alternative education programs, and harming student journalism, there has been little talk about the proposed cuts we could still make far away from the classroom and on academic programs entirely. And while I love the administration's support from our site, it may seem to be a real disconnect when the first slated cuts are to successful student programs and not to potential excessive administrative costs that in the short term may have significantly less impact on students' classroom achievement. And while I understand that the district has done well considering the situation they were put in, I still believe there is room to reevaluate how much money is allocated to the district and our site's administration. I hope you, as a committee, explore reducing administrative redundancies before cutting the lifeline to programs many students actively utilize and love. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Hannah Sellers, and I am the editor-in-chief of the sophomore edition of the Cub Bark this year in nonfiction. And nonfiction has been an absolutely game-changing class for me, and I'm looking forward to advanced journalism, publishing the Bark, and possibly, with my newfound passion, pursuing a career in journalism. I recognize that our funding situation is going to require some difficult decisions, and I do not envy the fact that you guys have to make them. However, the Redwood Bark, as well as the Tam and Drake newspapers, have an outsized impact on our entire student body. Aside from the 120 students or so who are currently in the Redwood journalism program, the Bark is one of the few institutions that brings the student body together, serves as a fundamental voice for change in our schools and local community, and many could argue is a profound source of our school identity. In an age where it is difficult to get teenagers off their devices, a new edition of the Bark does just that. Students often, before even entering Redwood, read the Bark and aspire to be part of such a valuable publication. Our stands are empty not long after they're filled, and the demand for paper is consistently high. While the entire journalism program is not on the chopping block, the loss of our adult mentor will result in seriously diminished opportunity to truly engage in the fourth branch of our democracy. So I please ask, when you are considering cuts for release time, to review the impact that the individual program has not only on the participants, but the entire student body and the fabric of our school community. Thank you. I know this is a difficult job.
Thank you for your comment. Really appreciate that. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Megan Potter, and my son is applying to the TEAM program. The TEAM teachers are tenured, and their place on the seniority list makes it likely that they will be teaching in the district next year. There are no additional district funds that go towards the TEAM program, so I don't see any savings in cutting the program, but I see a significant loss to these students. Over 3,500 people have already signed a petition to save the TEAM program in the last few days. That number is rising swiftly. If we mobilize those signers, students, alumni, teachers, parents, and concerned citizens, they could be a tremendous force in getting a supermajority for the parcel tax in the November election. If this happens, it will benefit much more than the TEAM program. With a motivated volunteer force and the community understanding of what these cuts will mean, there is hope for a better outcome. Even if you submit a qualified budget, you will be back to a positive budget before cuts would need to be implemented. Passing the parcel tax this November can be your stated plan. And there's every chance that the budget would be approved with input from the county through the process. As a graduate of SWAS at Sir Francis Drake High School many years ago, I can tell you these programs are life-changing. You are less than 5% from achieving the supermajority right now. And with effort from people like this, I believe that you could surpass it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Calvin Rosevear. I'm here today as a TAM High alumni from the class of 2018, more significantly as one who was involved in the journalism class and TAM News publication for 4 years. Thank you. And one who has a brother currently in the midst of it. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the immense privilege I had within this extraordinary program, uniquely inspiring within my education during this time. More importantly, it's my duty to lobby for this program the best way I can, as my experience is not isolated and is now more relevant than ever. I can spend the time discussing the mechanics of the decision upon this board. how cutting this funding will effectively cease print journalism in the district for the first time since 1919, create increased legal liability for students within the publishing process, and restrict access to a precious educational opportunity. However, I'm not going to delve into these points too much, as the editorial written by the TAM News staff, as well as the current TAM News advisor's email to this board, also my trusted teacher of 4 years, Mr. Jonah Steinhardt, both emphasize these points more eloquently than I could begin to. I beg members of the board to read these if they have not already. Instead, I will focus on my experience within the TAM News publication and the classroom. From my freshman year in 2015 through my graduation in 2018, I witnessed a transformation within the publication. Classroom is growing, the ideas are growing with it. It's an unfortunate irony that this intellectual growth is coinciding with fiscal realities. Over this time, the program has maintained its rare flexibility. I'm running low on time, so I'm going to skip to my...
You can also leave us the paper.
Okay, I'm going to leave that for you too, but I'll end on this. I stand up here today to urge the board to take advantage of this opportunity to act on values of democracy, inclusivity, and education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, feel free to leave the paper with us. Thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Not necessarily of the speaker, but of Tara, because an allegation was made that this would increase the legal liability for the papers, but it doesn't change the legal liability if we reduce the release period, correct?
It does not change the legal liability to the district, no.
Right. Well, and the responsibility of the advisor to
Correct.
Counsel the students. Thank you.
So, Mr. Ford, we've got to try and stay in 2 minutes this time.
Okay. I'm Chuck Ford. As schools make budgetary cuts, the tendency is to gravitate towards the most cost-efficient methods to educate students. You end up with one-size-fits-all schools. Please, please be careful and keep this in mind as we move forward in this process. I'm not going to say much about team. You know where my heart is on that. And I think the students who spoke were far more eloquent than I could be. But I can say that A, they are typical, and B, if you do a little arithmetic, multiply 24 students by 29 years, and you've got that many stories pretty much the same. And a word about journalism. I'm not familiar particularly with the BARC. It has a venerable tradition and history. I know that the Jolly Roger, with John Weller, an excellent teacher, is now recovering after a really dormant period. And I'd hate to see that get cut. So I'll speak directly to the TAM News, with which I am familiar. I spent a lot of time over there visiting when I was on the board, and I strongly recommend you guys do that too. It is an island of excellence. It is one of the crown jewels, and I think TEAM is too. Don't pluck those crown jewels out of the district. 29 seconds. Oh my
I am
gosh.
impressed. Yeah.
I've
never experienced this with you.
What do they say? Don't mess with Texas. Don't mess with excellence. I no more would walk into April Tucker or Dave Lapp's class with a Madeline Hunter five-step lesson plan and tell them you have to do it this way. If something is working, let's keep it working. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. You'll need to move the mic. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm very tiny. Hi, my name is Josie Spiegelman. I am an editor-in-chief for the TAM News. And I'm very angry. I'm angry that Measure B didn't pass. I'm angry that amazing programs are being cut. And I'm angry about the state that the previous administration has left us all in. But I'm also angry because this board doesn't seem to be acknowledging what this cut means to our program. Being in the TAM News drove me to new heights. It taught me to be a leader and speak up. I can't express what the print publication does for me and all of those who have been involved. Stuck in a stuffy room with me for 6 hours on a Wednesday night, and how cutting the time we actually get to produce the magazine will truly mean the end of an 100-year-old publication. Personally, I have nothing but respect for Dr. Topier. The task force that she runs, the one that is working to combat sexual assault and harassment in this district, is one of the things that I am most proud of in this school. But I have to admit, I would not be in this task force if not for journalism. Nowhere else is the portrayal of sexism and women in the media taught and written about but in my journalism class. Journalism gave me the courage to become angry and point out the injustices in this district and in our community. Cutting the time we get to write quality journalism cuts the impact that we have in the district, and as previously mentioned, gives our single advisor less time to review our paper and articles for legal liabilities. Cutting the release period, as mentioned before, would most likely cut our print publication, and that makes me angry. Yeah, as I was saying, I was angry. I have a lot of emotion about this. That's it.
Understood. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Hello, my name is Linda Sheehan, and I hope you can understand me. Sometimes my speech isn't very clear. As I explained earlier to some, I am one of the deaf people here. And reading lips and so forth and hearing what people have to say, I think you guys are overlooking your resources. You're looking at what you don't have and instead of realizing what you do have. You have journalism people who could put together a good reason why you need this bond. They could do the research and they can put out the newsletters that you need to get the parents aware of what's really needed here. That's just one step, you know. And the other step is you do have all these other people that would volunteer some time to raise money, and there are other ways to raise money to get what you need, and there are other places to make cuts. I mean, you may have to make some cuts, yes, I get that. But you don't need to make cuts in this program versus that program. You need to make cuts across the board. Everybody needs to share a little of the pain. The team program was a big part of my daughter's life, and the amazing result of what happened through there has thrilled me every day since it happened. And I'd hate to see that lost. And I don't think it needs to be lost. I think you guys need to do is climb that mountain. Every time when Amanda was growing up, she had some learning issues, and it seemed like she spent all her time trying to climb a mountain and never getting to the top. And then she got the team, and she was able to get to the top of the damn mountain. Okay?
Thank you.
And I think you guys can do something here. You just have to believe in yourself, just like she had to believe in herself at TAM.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sophia Martin, and I am a student at Drake. But despite what you may think, I am here on behalf of the TAM News. During most of my freshman and all my sophomore year, I was at Tamalpais High School. Growing up as an African American in Marin County has obviously had challenges. Throughout middle school, I would straighten my hair and do anything I could to possibly fit in. I was so insecure with myself and was focused more on that than my education and finding passions of mine. Then I came to TAM, and I finally found people who not only looked like me, but just people who simply accepted me. That was at TAM News. No one treated me as if I looked different or didn't belong, in contrast to how I had felt my entire life. And more importantly, they let me have a voice. Just a year before, not wanting to even acknowledge my ethnic background, turned to me writing and publishing an article called Being Biracial and Black. I finally was proud of who I was and was happy I had a community that was as well. While I am on the state board working for criminal justice reform and volunteering for district attorney's office and working on restorative practices at Bayside MLK, this article is still what I am most proud of. TAM News has made me feel for once like I am important, which is why, while still I am at Drake, I drive all the way from Fairfax to Mill Valley every single month because I just love it that much. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Good evening.
Hi. My name is Gary Brooks, and I'm a parent of a team kid who's also at TAM. She swims and plays water polo, and she's she was doing fine at TAMP, right? She probably could have just puttered along and graduated, and she would have been great. But you know, a couple of weeks ago, she's been interning at an OB at Marin General, and she called her mom at 2:00 in the morning and said, "Oh my God, I've found what I want to do for the rest of my life." Right? This wasn't something that she had a chance to do at TAM. It was something that team really brought to her. You know, on the camping trips, on the hiking trips, she's found a community where she's learned to write poetry and share in a way that she's never been able to do. It's she's really blossomed, and that's something that team has given her. It's that culture of understanding, and it's a place for kids that some who weren't doing fine, but some who are just doing okay, who can really shine. And so I hope you can find some creativity in your budgeting. I hope that you can find a way to keep the team program going. I hope you'll let the community find a way to make it work. And then I'd also like you just to make sure that you guys know, and I'm sure you do, how many hundreds of people there were standing outside in support of team and this community. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys make the right call.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Benji. I'm back. I'm actually only up here to clarify something from earlier, because I'm concerned that there was maybe.
Did you already talk?
No, I'd like to clarify a point that that Calvin raised and then Trustee Ronish commented on.
Okay, that's what I want.
If we lose our release period, that doesn't increase the legal liability for any one event or for any one problematic thing that we publish. It increases the chance that something problematic will be published. And the reason for that is in California, you can't require that anything that student journalists publish be reviewed by an advisor or by a teacher beforehand. It's just going to be published, right? And I don't think there's any chance that cutting the release period and continuing with the same or slightly fewer number of students in journalism, that doesn't decrease the number of things that we publish. It just decreases the quality of the oversight. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. I think we have some clarification we need as we move forward, but thank you very much.
Email us.
Thank you. Are there any more people that would like to comment that are outside at this time? I want to make sure everyone's had a chance to comment on this agenda item before I talk a little bit about process. So this is what I want to talk about. So I want to be really clear, and I want to hear from my fellow trustees. So right now, the action that we'll take eventually, after we have a discussion, will be just on approving the current year's budget. So it's for a positive certification. In terms of the release periods and some of these other issues, the board, we will discuss them. I think we all heard, what's your name? I know your name, I'm drawing a blank. Thanks, Karen. I was trying to think of your last name, I'm sorry. When you brought up the issue, thank you, brought up the issue of looking at release periods across the board. I mean, we'll have that sort of discussion to reach consensus and give the district feedback or direction. There's one nuance that I want to discuss, and that is the team program. We'll discuss the team program, but technically, in order to take any action, the agenda item where we approve or disapprove the, I think it's 12C. 12C is where we discuss and take action on Resolution 19-12. So this is the action where we eliminate, reduce the number of certified employees. So team is not on here, but it's like what you'd said or somebody said before, those two employees have seniority and aren't part of that. But there are a couple items within here that's a reflection of that action. So that is where if the board were to take or a board member wished to vote against even waiting or including team in the consideration over the next 2 months, that's where that would happen. I do want to remind everybody that tonight it's really the board on that action is giving the district permission to move ahead and do further analysis, let employees know that they may get laid off, And so that's the tenor of it. But I wanted to clear that up because I'm not sure, I have no way of knowing how the other board members are looking at this. So does that make sense to you all? No, I can tell there's a no coming.
No, it does make sense, but I wonder if I can clarify it. So the item that you referenced in reduction of FTE has to be made if we're going to recommend reduction of 6.2.
It's 1.6 and 1.
No, I'm talking about the whole list because these are recommended. These are recommended. These are recommendations being made to the board to discuss tonight, and we need to vote on that resolution tonight because notices to lay off teachers have to be filed by March 15th. So
could a board member make a motion to remove 2 of the items? Because the 2 items that reflect team could be removed is what I'm suggesting. If a board member wishes to do that. I'm just anticipating not the board agreeing on every part of this.
And the board could do that. A board member could do that, but then we aren't meeting the recommended cuts of 6.4 FTE, which doesn't get us any closer to the 1.4 million that we have identified in the discussion. Yes,
that's what we'll
thank
discuss.
you.
Right.
And then, as Corbett said, the $3 million that we need to identify.
Absolutely.
So,
and I think, and that's what so what I'm trying to navigate now is when do we have that part of the discussion? And I think, yes, you have an idea.
I was going to say, I would recommend that you vote on the certification of the second interim, because then you can have this conversation on that agenda item.
Okay. So we can vote on this, and then when should we discuss journalism and release periods?
Well, so to clarify, I would vote on this item, and then when you get to the PKSs,
that's when we can
talk
more about that
gain a little more
holistically.
clarity.
That way, it's all together. There, we got that figured out. Good. So, can I please ask for a motion to approve the interim budget and the positive certification?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will move on to the next agenda item, which was 12B, which is discuss and take action. This is a different resolution than what I was just talking about. Resolution 19-11 to determine criteria for order of seniority of employees.
Good evening, President Lundgren, Board, Superintendent Topier. Mary, could you pull up there you go. Thank you. As I believe you're aware, we have a number of certificate employees with identical start dates, hire dates, seniority dates, if you will. And as we contemplate potential reduction, we have to have ways to break ties for those of equal seniority. And this resolution does just that. You see it really becomes a matter of looking at a person's credentials and other experiences they may have, and then assigning points to those, and then you create a seniority list from those who have the same hire date. So I respectfully ask that you pass this tie-breaking resolution, which was used to create the list of potential certificated reductions that you'll see in the next resolution.
Any questions before I ask if there's a public comment on this item? Is there any public comment on the seniority list and how it was put together? Okay, no public comment. And then can I please ask for a motion to approve Resolution 19-11?
So moved.
Pardon me? We did have it, yeah. Very quick, yes, I'm going to allow it this time because we haven't seconded it.
So we have a thing in place to cut teachers, but do we have a thing in place to cut administrators?
That's not what this is. It's not, this is a seniority list. And maybe, Lars, after the meeting, could you explain to her, because it's not part of this agenda, but I would like her to get the information. Thank you. So the motion is on the floor. Can I ask for a second? Is there a second? Did I hear a second? And I just didn't know it? Would somebody like to second the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mary?
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you, that passed. Now we'll move on to item 12C, discuss and take action on resolution 19-12. And this is the one that there's a portion of it that does pertain to the team program. And so we can discuss that. We can discuss the other items that were provided to us that the district is planning on studying over the next few months. Release periods come to mind. And so I would like to open it up for discussion. And some of it might be asking you or the superintendent questions. We'll see.
I guess as it relates to the release periods,
You got really
as it relates to the release periods, if we have 14 who have release periods and we're just talking about 4, I think it would be good to have more clarity in terms of why these 4 and not the other 10. And so I guess I'm cautious on proceeding with that where it affects 28.6% of those, but without clear reason in terms of rationale for that.
Would you like to get that information now? Is there any clarification you can provide how?
No, I mean, I think we heard direction tonight to look at all release periods. Obviously, that is something we could do, and we could take action for next year on that, should the board so decide. So I think it will help clarify. So these actions, if you were to take this would allow us to explore reducing staffing legally. Okay? And it could be from the 3 journalism teachers' release periods. It could be from other release periods that we explore. The other thing is taking this action does not mean the board has to execute those actions. We have to meet a March 15th deadline in order to be able to take this action by the end of the year. So the board, and unfortunately, Measure B and some other things came up very quickly for us in this timeline. However, the recommendations did come from the Fiscal Advisory Committee that was in place previously. The board does not have to use those recommendations. The Fiscal Advisory Committee was put in place to make such recommendations. The board can act on this, and it can put us down a path to explore more. It doesn't mean necessarily that the board is deciding tonight to not authorize team next year or to not authorize the release periods. It's allowing the board to explore those options, should they choose to, between now and May 15th.
Can you clarify how this action has anything to do with release periods, though?
So the teachers with release periods across the district, for the most part, are higher up on the seniority list. If I work 4 periods and I'm suddenly going to start working 5, that means someone else doesn't need that 1 period, or that period won't be available for them to teach. So basically, if you were to take all of the release periods in the district, if there's 14, that is 2.8 full-time equivalent teachers. So this, some of these reductions here would allow for whoever has a release period to come back into that classroom full-time, and it would allow us to not have the cost of the other teacher who we no longer need, or the other 0.2, 0.4, 0.6 FTE that we no longer need.
But if we were to ask you to look at all release periods, how is all release periods reflected in this document?
It wouldn't be reflected in this document for next year. It would allow us to explore those further reductions the year out. They become ongoing. We would be looking at then reductions again next year to staffing in order to accommodate.
Tara, can you just give a rough list? Name 3 or 4 other release periods. So leadership, link crew.
I don't believe link crew has a release period. Instructional coaching has a release period. Our English language learner coordinators have a release period.
And so, yes, so this looks at the first set of release periods. And I think it's really important to recognize that 2 years ago, the Fiscal Advisory Committee was put together to identify the initial $5.8 million in cuts. And then we went out with Measure J. And that was to be a temporary kind of bandage, right? And then we had 3 new trustees that came in, and we ran on that we are not going to keep delaying, or in our opinion, keep delaying resolution of deficit spending and building up the reserves. And so that is what we've been working towards. I'm angry Measure B didn't pass. I'm angry that we're in this position where we have to start looking at cuts that have to be made in this program. I'm angry that our community did not support Measure B, that some people said they didn't realize the urgency of what we were looking at. We've always been very clear about what needs to be done. And these release periods were identified by the Fiscal Advisory Committee, right? So for journalism. There are other release periods we can look at. Because they're not on the agenda tonight, we can't use them for next year because of the notice that we have to give on March 15th. So if we give that notice tonight, as Tara said, that does not mean we're taking the action because we have until May to retract that. So if we find other savings, if we find ways to get to the $3 million in cuts, then we can do that. We have some time. There are statutory dates that we have to abide by. This is only $406,000 that's on the FTE release or the FTE sheet. We still need to identify other areas. And I am sounding hysterical because we're at an urgent time and the community needs to know that. And so the fact that we're considering these things does not mean that we don't value team, not in the slightest. It does not mean that we don't value journalism. Not in the slightest. But we have very hard decisions to make, and I worry that if we say we don't want to act on this sheet because it may include team, because it may include release periods, and we haven't identified any other areas, then all we are doing is kicking the proverbial can down the road, and we are not taking the steps that show our community that if we go out again in November and say, okay, this time, really, really give us your mandate on what you want our education to look like. Do you want the AAA education that matches our AAA bond rating? Or do you want kind of a B, B- education where it looks more like Alameda where I teach, where it's a 6-period day, where there's limited enrichments, where there are not opportunities for students to explore other things besides the A to G requirements that are required by a public school district in order to prepare students for the UC system. So this is real, and I don't want to see us continue to kind of hope that we're going to be able to find some other savings down the road. I think this is the first step. It's not permanent until May, but it might be the urgency that we need to start really looking at where can we have these savings, how can we mobilize our community if we decide to go out for another parcel tax, all of those things.
Thank you. I'd still like to open it up, but can you just pull the microphone towards you?
Sure. I'll move towards it.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess I'm also upset about Measure B. I think we all are. But rather than being upset with the community for not supporting it, I think we can also look inward and say, what could we have done differently? What could we have done to mobilize more community support, to express it differently and present it? Could we have structured it differently? What could we have done? We still had 62%. That was not that far off. The first time anything has failed here. We have the 4th strongest district in the state by some of the rankings. Let's not forget that. Let's continue to deliver the education that the community expects here. We have a chance in November to move forward with another parcel tax. If we look at what's identified here, that's $406,000. That is a small amount financially, a significant impact on the program in terms of areas that are distinctive to the district, and I would suggest we remove some of the these cuts to the programming, given that they won't make so much financial difference, but will impact the direction of the students' lives here.
To echo a little bit of what Cynthia was saying, though, one of the public commenters, and I really appreciate everyone's, the passion that came from the audience was incredible and very heartfelt. someone made the comment that they have 3,500 signatures gathered to keep the team program, and that if we save team, then she's going to use those 3,500 people to help get the parcel tax passed. We couldn't find 10 people to serve on the committee to pass Measure B. So, well, Dan, I totally agree. Like, we're all upset. We're all upset that Measure B didn't pass. And could we do things differently? Absolutely. Can we do things better? Always. But until we actually take some steps that where we really truly are feeling the pain, and I'm not saying it's got to be team, it's got to be journalism, but we have to stop psyching. Psych, just kidding. We can get this done again. We have to make these cuts. I've served on the Fiscal Advisory Committee since the very first time it met 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We've been through all of those conversations, and I can guarantee that if it weren't team and journalism on the docket tonight, the room would have been equally full if we had talked about wellness. Do you remember when we talked about the librarians? All of these programs are so dear to everyone, and I get it, they are. But we have to start somewhere. So, to Tara's point, if we are not bound by making specific decisions about which programs will be cut by putting forward this resolution, I strongly vote towards putting it forward to at least get the ball rolling in the right legal direction.
Can we clarify, given the slides talking about what the specific areas, I guess, how is that in terms of the recommendations, I guess, to then switch those cuts? I guess I'd be somewhat uncomfortable with that.
Just so I'm clear,
Go ahead.
What we agreed earlier was a statement of our second interim budget position.
Right.
And outlined the things that we would put into consideration, provided that we have created that option for ourselves, subject to this resolution, right? So we're certainly not making any decisions about cuts. We're fulfilling our responsibility, provided that those are the decisions we ultimately make. And I'm on board with that. I mean, yeah, I'm pissed that Measure B didn't pass, having spent 2 years on the fiscal advisory and the treasurer of the Measure J campaign. I mean, it's just, this is where we are, but this is where we are. And it's getting real, and this is real. And I support this.
I would like to add something. I served on the board with Chuck Ford, and so I was on what used to be, it wasn't fiscal advisory, it was called the Budget Study Committee at the beginning of 2016, and the same things surfaced then that have continued to surface. So my perspective is slightly different. This does not feel like a rush to take action, because so many of the same things are coming forward with what the community values. The whole process has been through polling, survey, meetings, to reach out to the community to protect the parts about our schools that they value, because we forget that we have a huge community out there well beyond the parent community. It was very difficult for the previous board to approve wellness, because we all knew this was coming, but we saw the benefits of wellness. And as we sit here, I especially hearing all those students from team, and so many of the stories were heart-wrenching, and I know how much a program like that can save a student. So it is incredibly difficult. Where I get torn, though, is that as I sit here and know that we're really approving the option for the district to move forward, I would have some specific requests if I were to vote yes, and that is, I really want to know why team, even though like I said, I was part of that committee in 2016, and a lot of these same issues surfaced, but I would just like more clarity so that come May, I would have the information I needed to without a shadow of a doubt, be able to vote accordingly. I was part of the board that we started looking at special ed, and we had long meetings about should we open a CEC and what that would cost and the return on that. And our board was heavily criticized for not moving faster. And Chuck and I at the first meeting said we want to make thoughtful cuts. So let's not rush into this. Let's really only cut things that we really analyze first and are well thought out. And so for the past now 3 years, that's what's been happening. And I think the realization I've come to is I think back then I thought, well, if we do thoughtful cuts, they're not going to hurt as much. And that's wrong. It was a misnomer. The only ability it's given is that we haven't had to turn around and say, okay, 6 periods, okay, everybody out. And we didn't have to do it that way. So I really am very concerned about our students that thrive with TEAM and those that are out there that are going to need a program like TEAM. And I am with what I've heard so far from a few of you that I am comfortable voting in favor of this, knowing that we will get more clarity and the district will have time to sharpen their pencils and come back with more information about what we have ahead, because we are, based on what we heard in the interim report, if we, and we will come June, we are going to have a recovery plan. We can count on it. So it will be very laid out at that point for the community. It'll be very laid out of what's going to happen over the next year. Programs will be listed, and it's what we're going to be doing. So I am also comfortable voting in favor, even though I'm, no words. There's just no words.
I'm happy to answer any questions you might have just on the procedural aspect of this, if you have any questions at all.
I guess looking at slides 44 and 45 together with some of it on 44 relating to, I guess, but this, I have to, so in the, what we discussed previously had mentioned, obviously, TEAM, journalism, the release periods. This relates to those. That other item also mentioned the teacher leader program and the teacher staffing, tightening the staffing. I guess looking at the teacher leader program and the class size, together those two add up to almost $1 million versus the 400,000 for these others. Is there a way to separate these items as it relates to this agenda item?
If I'm understanding you correctly, is it possible to approve the resolution minus one of the or multiple FTE assignments there? That's up to the board's discretion. Yes, it's not an all. I guess it's not an all or nothing.
Yes, it would be in the way you made the motion, is how that would be distinguished, Dan. So you could make a motion to approve this without, and you would name specific things that you would want removed.
In that case, and I'm assuming you're looking at TEAM just based on and that would be the mathematics and it would be the English, correct?
1.0 English and 1.0 mathematics.
So one thing I do want to point out before it's like, that's totally the board's discretion. We're just doing staffing. It could shake out that we end up overstaffed 1.0. TEAM could stay intact, journalism could stay intact as they are now, and we could still end up 1.0 over in FTE in English, and then we can't reduce. Then we're 1.0 over in FTE, which is $147,000 approximately, and we don't have the ability to make that change for next year. That's the only flexibility that this offers, and I'm just want to make sure that you understand
I guess it's
how this works.
Yes, I understand that. I guess it's problematic in that we're voting on a resolution where we discussed taking away team, discussed getting rid of release periods, and then the motion is far more vague and talking about many different positions. And so if we're talking about those positions in terms of having the flexibility to do so, but then making it clear what the priorities are, that would be one thing. But if we haven't had. If there were to be a motion to say that team would be saved for next year, fine, but that's not on the agenda for this.
No, she just said.
We can approve this, but we can still save
Right.
team for next year. We just are reserving our options by doing this.
Okay, so this, and maybe I'm the one that's lost in the weeds, but this seems to be getting more confused as we discuss. It sounds like some members are uncomfortable with taking a preliminary vote, right? And this is a preliminary vote, and it's on notices that have to be given by March 15th. They do not become permanent until May 15th. If we do not give those notices tonight, we cannot reduce the staff. So the reduction in staff that is up there has to be tied to some anticipated parameters. We can't just say magically we're going to get rid, or we're advocating reduction of 6.4 FTE and we're just going to throw it up in the air and see where it falls. So that's why journalism release periods came up. That's why team came up. Those decisions aren't permanent until May 15th. It sounds like some people are uncomfortable with recommending team, and so I think the question is, and I don't think we take this out and segment the resolution. So we could either, I think we have to act on the FTE tonight. So I move that we approve Resolution 1912 as is.
I second that.
Can we more discussion?
Yeah, we have to have a public comment, don't we? Yeah, sorry.
Are we done
Wait,
discussing it?
No, we're not. No. No, I want to give you a chance, Dan. So we can still. We can have public comment, and then you can.
I guess since these would be tied to specific positions, I would say to look at it and to reduce the cuts by 2.4 FTE, which would then leave TAM untouched and keep the release periods in place for this. 0.8 for the release periods and the 1.6 for team.
Just waiting to make a comment if possible.
I think what we'll do is we will have public comment now, and I think we'll probably be continuing our conversation. But thank you.
Okay.
Wait, is there? Oh no, yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. I'm going to say something that probably nobody's going to like, but I think that you've got to jump in and make it painful for everybody. And I think that 7th period needs to go, or say it's going to go. I mean, if you're going to put out teachers, the paperwork, put it out for all of them. And I think you'll have a screaming mania on your hands, and that might get that vote that you need in November. I mean, sometimes you really got to make it painful for people to wake up and smell the roses. No, I don't think you should cut team, because I think it's one of the core classes, not one of the extras. I think it's one of your basic things that you need here, okay? But those extra after-hour stuff, that's the fun stuff. And then, yes, it is important, and it's what makes school important. But unless you really make it painful for the parent to get out there and get those votes, you're not going to have the money. So I know no one's going to like what I just said, but I'll put it out there.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Diana Glocker. I'm a mother of a junior at TAM, and I'm looking for clarification. When you say that you've got the list of FTEs you have to reduce by, you've got those named and segmented so that you have an action plan on deck for the deadline of May 15th. Is that correct? And so only that segmented group would be on the chopping block. Nothing else, they couldn't be swapped out for anything else. So those would be the only specific FTEs that you could reduce by. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So even though we're saying that it's not final, there's no other option but those. Is that correct? You could retract them, but you could not substitute them. So it could have been any variety of offerings on that list. This just happens to be the ones where you landed. Okay. And then as a parent, I would just like to know what options parents have to set up groups like PATH that supports the arts at TAM to augment whatever cuts you ultimately do. I'm in finance. I understand budget cuts. My heart bleeds for all of us, and I know it's painful. So I would like to know if there's anything we can do.
Thank you. We'll definitely get in touch with you. Grab your.
But can I just help clarify? The 6.4 FTE reduction doesn't necessarily mean going to the 1.0 team teacher, the 0.2 journalism teacher. This is all based on a seniority list. Like people will be informed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they will, actually, Tara, why don't you explain it, because you're.
So the FTE that are being reduced they are specific people, and they are in specific content areas. Okay, so, in English, those are the content areas, right? We cannot swap those out. We cannot go to, a science teacher or a different science teacher at TAM and say, oh, sorry, we're going to lay off you instead. Anyone who would be laid off for next year at any amount of FTE has to be notified by March 15th. So we can execute those, we can execute some of those, or we can execute, none of them. We have until, once they are approved before March 15th, we have until May 15th to give final notice to those teachers.
Oh, I think there's more public comment behind you.
Tap me on the shoulder.
Hi, Jill Sellers. I'm parent of a sophomore, and I'm also sit on the Larkspur Corte Madera School Board. And I just was going to come up here and say that I definitely support moving forward with a resolution on particular kinds of service, because you have some time to met out what the exact cuts are going to be. But then I just heard to the contrary, which is different than my experience, that if this particular kinds of service resolution is approved, that then in fact the programs that were discussed tonight are automatically going to be cut, which is contrary to what you just said. So I'm a little bit.
No.
Okay.
No, that's not.
So if that's the case, if this is just buying us time, which is what my original impression of it was, I would definitely recommend that the board move forward with this resolution, but in the interim time, figure out between now and May what programs are going to be cut. And it doesn't have to be team, it doesn't have to be journalism, but we can go back to the chopping block and start massaging through all of these release periods, start looking at the impact of each release period, as long as we're not locked in tonight. And I think there is some confusion about being locked in.
Okay, so can you, so notices are given to specific teachers tonight. So we cannot swap out different teachers. So if we identified other release periods that we wanted, that said, if we came up and the board discussed and said, you know what, we're in a situation where we can't have any release periods, right? The only release periods we could act on for next year's budget would be the ones that are identified tonight, because the teachers that had those release periods would be notified saying you're going to teach 5 classes rather than 4 classes in a release period. If we identified other release periods, we would not be able to approach those for budget cuts until the following school year, so next March.
But, and what's identified there is based on what was contemplated and discussed in terms of the reductions. And so if there was to be a change and leading to a different mix of teachers whose service wouldn't be needed, it then could have a different impact where there wouldn't be the flexibility if the decisions were changed in terms of priorities.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. I guess there's 39 seconds left. I just want to say I know this pretty well, and I remain a little bit confused about the way this conversation is unfolded a little bit. I would just, I guess, be cautious. To me, if you reduce these FTE, you have a certain amount of FTE to work with. And like there isn't a Redwood English teacher up here yet. A Redwood English period, a release period is being contemplated for reduction. Anyway, if you have the time to massage the information that you got tonight and figure out which release periods are going to do, I would support this. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just for a point of clarification, our seniority list is district-wide. So if you are, for example, there is someone retiring out of math at Redwood this year, so the idea is that there would be a seniority list, right? So somebody might want to move into that, or if somebody is someone's coming back from a leave, right? It's just not necessarily a one-to-one match. So like the release period, the English journalism release period at Redwood, that .2 is considered district-wide. So the reduction in English staffing is district-wide. It's not specific. Yeah.
Good evening.
Hi, I spoke again, or a little earlier, so Gary Brooks. And I'd just like to, it sounds to me like what you're trying to decide tonight is you're trying to give yourselves the options of making a choice later, right? So you're not making a final decision specifically about team, but in a way you kind of are, because you can't really cut anything else, and it's not like there's going to be any less pressure going forward. So when it comes, you've kicked the can down the road to May, and team is on the block, but maybe there's not as many people in the room. I just want to say that tonight you are voting your values on that. So if it's important to you to keep that program going, if it's important to keep that service that it offers to your community, to find a place where kids that don't necessarily, they're kind of they're square pegs, have a place to learn and thrive and be successful, then you're really making that decision tonight. So I would encourage you to take team out of this year's thing. Let the 3,500 students and their parents and the community find those votes for you and measure for the next round of funding, because I think we can do it. Thank you.
I know I've already spoken. This is going to take 10 seconds. Understanding this a little bit better and knowing that it's March 10th and March 15th is looming, but you've heard a lot of information tonight that may change your thinking on release periods in general. I would suggest that this board table this item for tonight, that staff come back with a plan that is a little bit more flexible if there's a possibility of doing that you hold a special board meeting in the next couple of days to approve that, and let this information kind of suss out, because I think it's hard to start picking and choosing right now when emotions are running high and when there's possibly other things that you can look at. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item before I bring it back to the board for discussion? Okay, one more public comment. It's okay.
I'm Erin Kelly, and I have 3 kids that have been teamies and 3 kids that played 29 teams of sports through. So I'm a sports enthusiast and a team enthusiast. I have been here many times begging for you not to cut team. It's not my first rodeo, and I have never heard any football program on the chopping block or AP classes on the chopping block, and I am late to the party in this agenda today, but I'm wondering why that is. And if you move forward tonight with this particular agenda, these are the items that stay alive to kick down the, right? Yeah, we can't then come back in April and say, what about football? What about? So I might be out of line here, but I'm curious.
They're different. This is certificated staffing, so it is a different.
Yeah.
It's a different process. And I think I'm feeling compelled to say something, and I think it's important that everyone hear this. These are not the first cuts this district's made. This district has been making cuts for 2.5 years. We made nearly $6 million worth of cuts. I actually think the fact that people think these are our first cuts is a tribute to how far away from the classroom the Fiscal Advisory Committee worked and how hard we've been working to keep these cuts from the kids. These are not the first cuts. We are a $90 million budget. We already cut $6 million out of that budget. You know, my letter today said I was heartsick because I really thought, where are we going to find more reductions? I thought we had met the community halfway. I really thought we had done the work we needed to do. But it's important that you know these are not the first cuts. This has been 2 years really in the making of reductions. And Measure B was meant to prevent further reductions.
Thank you. And I am aware of that because I have come on and off. Oh, do you have?
I think okay. She took some of your time, so it's fine to ask another question.
Sorry, I think I forgot my question.
No.
Yeah, I just feel like it's always these programs that really impact kids in a way, like the wellness, and no one in the TAM district needs an AP class. We have so many other opportunities for these kids to further their education for free at College of Marin and Berkeley and all around the Bay Area. And it just seems, and I understand that they're two different things, but it's always the same vital programs that really are game changers. And I just want to say, enough with trying to get rid of TEAM. It's a life-saving, amazing program.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And if I can just add to Tara's, not only are these not the first cuts, they're not going to be the last cuts. And I think that's just as essential for people to remember. And so because this, even with what's recommended, it doesn't get us to what we need to cut in the next year in order to not deficit spend.
I'll let you this time because I know this is a very
I have to say this because my kids were in this school district for 150 years, basically. The math program at TAM has always had a terrible reputation, and we still have the same players in the math department at TAM. I was at a dog park today with a freshman mom.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that comment.
Same people.
Yeah, thank you for making a comment.
Hi, I'm Hannah Sellers. I'm a sophomore at Redwood. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that I feel like there are a lot of kind of independent classes at Redwood, independent electives that aren't necessarily linked to any program, as TEAM is a program, journalism is a program, but there are independent electives such as women's history that's trying to be run next year. That was like there was many posters all over the school for it, or beginning guitar, or the SOAR class that was that started at Redwood this year, which are really interesting classes, but I feel like those could be classes that are less valuable and could be cut for a year or so. And so I feel like if the board is willing to reassess what the cuts that they're making and meet again before March 15th and reevaluate these cuts, these could be classes that you could definitely look into that may have less impact on the community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any more public?
I just want to quickly add that SOAR, if there's anything that you're not going to cut, I would say SOAR should be it, because it advocates for okay, let's just look at the room right here. Just right here can tell you our entire district. It's pretty
white.
Yeah. So SOAR is something that advocates for stuff like microaggressions that have been I'm sorry, I'm getting worked up, but it's stuff like that like is really important. Same with like sports. I'm an ex-student athlete, and sports really fund a lot of African American and Latinos like colleges that, in this community where there's a lot of wealthy white people who can get into college with, of course the middle class is pretty underpaid when it comes to like college, but still we need those kinds of things that support our students of color. So that's my little input.
Thank you, Devonna. Appreciate that. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Melanie Watson, and I am a parent in the district. I have a son who is currently attending Redwood. Apologize, I'm out of breath because I was here earlier this evening, and we were asked to go outside. I have to tell you that the quality of hearing the presentations outside was very, very poor. Many people left, including myself, and I've been at home trying to watch this live on Facebook. again, very poor quality audio. But I feel so passionate about the vote that you're about to make that I actually got in my car and I sped down here because there's so much confusion about what is actually going to take place at the moment. I understand that there are a certain number of headcount full-time equivalents that we are trying to vote on tonight. My understanding, if I'm correct, is that you've identified 2 programs, team and journalism, and those are the only areas that you can take this headcount reduction from if the vote passes this evening. Am I understanding that properly? Okay. I think that there's probably other people like myself who've been trying to listen on Facebook, who were here tonight, who got discouraged, who didn't come because of the virus. I think that this is a very rushed decision. When we were talking about the electives that could potentially be taken from, we can't even name all 14. I don't feel that this is a very well-informed decision that you all are making. I heard from the journalism program that advisory period is very important from a legal aspect. And I think that there is some more time that needs to be done to explore these breakout periods. And are there other elective periods that maybe wouldn't suffer so much from having that period cut? So my basic point to you all is that in terms of like public support, this was a very difficult time to hold this meeting, and the parameters of a small room made it very challenging as well. So I would urge you to take some more time to explore.
Thank you for your comment. I do want to, thank you. I do want to explain that we just found out, was it this morning, that we had or it was last night, that we find a new place to have the meeting because of the virus, and we just did the best we could. But again, because Chuck is here, and we had to approve $1.8 million worth of cuts, whatever year that was, 3 years ago. You implemented, added another 3. This thought process has been in play, and right now as board members we're just really trying to understand this recommendation and make sure we're clear on what the reductions are in relation to all that work that's been done. So I do want to assure you of that. This has not been rushed by a long shot. And go ahead.
So I don't know if we need more discussion, but I will say that my motion is pending. So when we get to the motions, mine's the first motion,
right,
which is approve Resolution 1912.
Okay.
Yeah, I already seconded.
Dan, did you make a motion also?
To remove the 2.4, yes, a motion to remove the 2.4 relating to release periods and team, and so it would be 4 FTE total.
I would like, and I think it's for the benefit of everyone here as well, if the superintendent could respond to each of those motions, and starting with Dan's motion of approving this minus the 1.6 and 1.0, I think I got that right, FTE, and so that would be the English and mathematics that reflect the team program, and how removing those, how it would also impact any sort of release periods.
Sorry, I'm not sure I was clear
So
on that.
if you did what Dan is requesting, and his I said requesting,
Yeah.
and the 1.6 FTE, I have it right here for you, and yeah, this one and this one.
The
Yeah.
English
How
and
would what effect would that have if that's taken off the table?
Right.
What effect would that have come May 15th in terms of difference in dollar value of the actual reduction, as well as any sort of the release period that you referred to earlier?
So, I mean, if I'm doing rough math, I don't have the dollar figure. I mean, a 1.0 is about $147,000 on average. So it would be, seems like it would be roughly, well, it would be,
There are offsets, and so
Yeah,
this
there's
in total is
offsets, yeah.
406,000, and so
so
this
I can't give you an exact.
team is much less than
yeah.
that.
Team is 0.8 would be the, is.
Right, because I was thinking about Lenny's comment before.
Well, I'm
which I
sorry,
was
it's
trying to-
1.6 is the total. That would be the
Okay.
Right,
reduction.
1.6 and 0.8 for a release.
Yeah.
Is two-
Okay,
that's
that was the part
2.4.
that,
Yeah.
okay. I'm just trying to put some perspective here and put it all on the
So-
table and trying to
yeah,
help
I guess-
facilitate the,
I
what we're looking
wasn't
at.
clear on the
Yeah.
question. Are you?
Yeah.
So it would be less
Well, I
of a
got-
reduction for next year
Right.
monetarily.
Right.
And, right, and.
Right.
So, I mean,
Okay,
so
I just-
theoretically, the board could still not authorize release periods, and that would just bring down class sizes within those areas, right?
I think what I was commenting on was that this one is also associated with the journalism release period. And it's so that one does have more of an impact to me. Okay, thank you. So it's not just the team, that's bundled together. Any other discussion before we figure out whose motion was first on the floor?
Student trustees, any comment?
Yeah, do you have any comment?
I don't think I understand enough to have a comment, if I'm being honest.
I think we should pass it.
So just to make sure that we follow Robert's Rules of Order and so forth, we had a motion on the floor, it was seconded, we had an amended motion, we would need a second on the amended motion.
I don't know that we had an amended motion.
I think Laura's saying that mine was an amendment to the original.
Yeah.
Oh, but I don't think his was seconded. So in that case, his motion was not seconded. It was, he proposed amended motion, but
That's
no
what I
one
mean. I mean,
seconded it. So
I don't know that it's
that's
been
correct.
resolved that there wasn't a second.
Right, okay, thank you. So trustee Cynthia's motion.
The motion to approve Resolution 1912 as is on the floor. It has been seconded. I ask that we call for a vote.
Aye.
Nay. Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
And I would like to comment that, a lot of comments were made tonight about what we value and that we're voting our values and all of those things. And as I said, because we are voting to make hard decisions about issuing preliminary notices that are tied to certain programs, does not mean that we don't value those programs. I do see the value in those programs, and I do take seriously my role as a trustee, as a fiduciary for this district, to keep this district solvent. And I do think it's time that we start making the hard decisions now that may motivate our community to go back out and support additional funding, or it may be the reality going forward that our education in this district will look different than what we have had the luxury of providing before when funds were more available. So I take that very seriously. And so when we were getting emails about being foolish or being unwise, or did we really want to make these decisions? No, we don't want to make these decisions, but we have to make these decisions, and that's why we were elected.
We have to make some decisions, not necessarily, we have a choice in those and how to get there, and whether it's with parcel taxes, the programming cuts, where there are different choices.
I'd like to add a little to what Cynthia just said. I've been looking at the same list since my daughter was a sophomore at Drake, and I called in from the Olympic National Forest to vote on those cuts that you just suggested. And I sat on the Fiscal Advisory Committee for 2 years, and I was a treasurer for Measure J, and I got it pains me to be doing what we're doing here now, but we are stewards of this district's finances, and we have got to be clear about how we're going to manage this thing going forward. And you always knew that you could find savings here or cut a little fat there, but you were getting a little close to the bone, and it was eventually, you were going to have to make some terrible decisions, and this is where we are. It's terrible. It's terrible. It pains me. It really does. This losing the election last week and to get where we are now, and this is where we are. I don't want to look in this thing and say aye and not see a thriving team really affecting people. We've got to figure this out, and this is not a marketing strategy. This is a financial stability and fiscal management plan. And I only hope that we can continue on the path to get this district where we need it to be.
Thank you. Karen, did you have anything else you wanted to say, or?
I too have served to raise and steward funds for our district, having been president of the Redwood Foundation for 2+ years, co-chaired Measure J, got that passed by 74% a year ago, served on the Fiscal Advisory Committee for 3 years. Every single conversation we have is over how do we save programs, how do we keep the cuts away from our students, and this is awful. It's not finite. It's not finite. And I think we still have a lot of conversations and work to do over the next couple of days. If the community doesn't want us, if the community cannot vote to support our parcel taxes, then it's inevitable. We have to make these changes. We have to make these cuts, painful as they are.
Well, I want to thank everybody, and there's really no words, but thank you. And it did really have an impact hearing all the stories tonight, and I really appreciated all the emails that I received, and I think the whole board received, and it wasn't lost on us. I think it's not that we didn't hear, but just what everyone has already said. We're facing a serious situation, and we now are in the position where we have to respect what the community has said to us by not passing that parcel tax. And just thank you, and I'm just very sorry that we're here. We're done with public comment, but if you wait just one moment.
Excuse me.
Did you want to take a recess or anything?
Recess? Okay.
We'll recess for about 2 minutes.
Well, some of it is just suggestions from teachers.
What's that?
That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. So thank you. Now we're reconvened, and we will talk about take action on bid number 65, Sir Francis Drake High School pool replaster.
Good evening once again. The Drake High Pool is long overdue for replastering. There is rebar coming through various lanes and so forth. I haven't met with him personally, but David O'Connor has met with our pool inspector, our countywide pool inspector. Wears a lot of hats, but he does inspect pools too. And we have informed him that we will be replastering the pool this summer. I don't think if we would have said that, I mean, we kept it from being condemned. We can't postpone this. It has to happen this summer. And we've selected a reputable pool contractor, low bid, and you have it there in your packet.
Any questions for Lars Christensen? Any discussion? Any public comment? I guess Ann doesn't want to have a public comment. So can I ask for a motion to take action on bid number 65 to approve the Sir Francis Drake High School pool replaster?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. So, Tara, would you like to give the board a COVID-19 update? I know it changes rapidly.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to publicly share. We are working really closely with Marin Health and Human Services and the County Office of Ed. It is a very fluid situation. It continues to change. And we are watching also very closely CDC guidelines and World Health Organization guidelines. As of right now, most of our global studies trips have been canceled because of travel warnings and other issues. Not all of them, but we're continuing to watch those and work with Brian Zalian and the Global Studies Program. So the other thing I want to speak to is we've been getting some emails asking why we're not closing preemptively. That is a decision that is made by Health and Human Services. It's not made by the district, or the district could, I guess, decide, but we are working in unison as a county to respond to this virus, and we're following the advice of the experts. Closing schools is enormously disruptive to learning. It's also disruptive to students. There are parents who don't get paid if they don't go to work, and sometimes they have to be home with people. There's a lot that goes into it. Parents who have students who they're concerned about can keep their students home with an excused absence. So we right now are in a 2-week non-essential indoor gathering cancellation period. They are doing them in 2-week periods. They said this is 2 weeks. They don't want to do it longer than that because they don't know what's going to change. We don't have community transmission in Marin yet, and when that happens, or if it happens, it changes the nexus. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to update the board. We continue to I have a link on the main page of the website that says COVID-19 communications, and that links to all of the communications that we have put out, including what to expect if we do close, as well as all of the news releases that Health and Human Services has put out.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just want to clarify. So, and even if we did preemptively close ourselves, we would not be reimbursed for not reimbursed for those days, but the state most likely wouldn't approve those days towards our 180, and so we'd have to tack them on at the end of the year at cancel vacation.
Right. At this time.
Okay, now we're moving on to item F, discuss and take action on contract for Assistant Superintendent, Educational Services. Lars.
As the board is aware, after an exhaustive search and a multi-step interview and selection process, we've identified Dr. Kimberly Armstrong, currently of the Edmond School District in Northern Washington, to serve as our incoming Assistant Superintendent, Education Services. You have the contract in your board packet, but we do have one addition to the contract I'd like to read into the record, please. It is under section 9.2. The addition is, it is further understood that such salary placement and health insurance shall cease upon the Assistant Superintendent, Education Services acceptance of employment elsewhere. As a condition of payment, the Assistant Superintendent of Education Services shall make reasonable efforts to seek other employment in a timely manner and to notify the district in writing immediately if the Assistant Superintendent, Education Services earns income from any employment. That is tacked on to item 9.2 in the contract.
Thank
And
you.
with respect, I would ask that you approve Dr. Armstrong's contract.
Any discussion by the board?
I think we ought to think about this in light of just, I think earlier tonight there's comments about the floor being pulled out last week. We've made decisions today that we wouldn't have made last Monday prior to the election, just recently. And so it's a terrible process in terms of going through hiring process and doing this. But I think we need to think about this in light of the other cuts that we're making right now.
I want to make a comment that I was on the board when the former superintendent left the district, and we went through the hiring process to hire Dr. Topier. With a great deal of effort and thought went into that process. And at that time, we hadn't executed the 1.8, and we knew we had all this ahead of us. And Dr. Topier, who was sitting in the assistant superintendent position for educational services, agreed to, while she was vacating that job, she would agree to try and wear two hats. Also at that time, there was someone still in the Department of Educational Services, but later Dr. Topier even worked with her team to move that person out of that admin role as to principal. So what this has left is 0 people in Educational Services Department, and we are an institution based on educational services. The other issue that I think would be hard with any position in any company, government agency, we can't forget how much effort there is in day-to-day management and leadership of overseeing an organization. And in this case, Dr. Topier has been asked and has been functioning in 2 full job positions, especially when we're reaching a point where we know that we have some very, very tough decisions and heavy lifting. What is always a concern is the best employees, you burn them out because they keep saying yes and they keep rising to the occasion. And it's always unnerved me when I've had an employee that is you can just count on. In fact, I just remembered this. I think I'm not going to say it out loud. But there was a time I was working with Tara when she was assistant superintendent, and she was doing something that I thought, gee, you're doing that too. And I thought, you're one of those people that you'll just do everything. So, yeah, so in any event, I really do strongly think this is important. I also think of, companies that I've worked for where we've had layoffs, and no one blinks an eye if they hire a new manager of finance, because you need a manager of finance. We're not widgets. And in this case, as one of the staff here at the district said, gee, you have a director of wellness, you have a director of nutritional services, you have a director of maintenance, and we don't have a director or a superintendent, a manager of educational services, and we don't even have educational services. We've got rid of the teacher leader program. So I think, especially with what we're headed, we need somebody that is focused on educational services. It's a perfect blend because Tara, we have a superintendent who is an expert in the area, and she will not just be blindly passing it on. They'll be able to work together. I am so strong about this one. I've just seen it happen too many times that you get a good manager or leader and you just burn them out and then they're gone. And if Tara were to leave tomorrow because she's just plain tired, I don't like to think of where we would be. I've experienced other leadership here, and they've been very good leaders, but Tara is the best. And I have no problem backing this up to anybody, and we've been transparent about it from the beginning. The board even said at the beginning, this is not a permanent solution. Well, we're reaching almost 2 years, and it's starting to become permanent if we don't do something. And just one last thing I'll say is that the very next day after we appointed Tara Topier, a former superintendent, more than one actually. One wanted to meet me for coffee, and I thought it was to congratulate me, and instead he's lectured me about, what are you thinking? There is no way a superintendent can be a superintendent and in charge of educational services. It'll never work. And I've heard that from, I feel very strongly. So, Dan, this is something you and I don't agree on, I'm afraid, but.
And I second everything Leslie said, and I think the Kentfield superintendent was one of the superintendents that said there's no way you're going to burn Tara out. So I'm glad we haven't burned you out, and I'm glad, well, she's still here. And the average superintendency is 3 to 5 years, and any qualified, good superintendent could leave this district and find a job tomorrow. There are a dearth of them. There's also an educational hiring cycle that education does not match the rest of the world. And particularly if you're going after administration or good teachers, you are hiring them in February because you are behind the curve. And so there is no way we would go out and hire someone in November because no one's looking in November that's worth their weight, and is what this district requires. And I think some of the comments tonight showed how much work we have to do on equity in this district. And Dr. Armstrong. That's one of her strengths. And it's time for us to focus on that, as well as educational services, as well as getting Tara back to working only the job for which her title is. And yeah, I can't emphasize enough the teacher leadership. If we are continuing to eliminate teacher leadership, it is Dr. Armstrong who is going to be meeting with the departments on each site, making sure that they are in coordination, making sure that our education is following the Common Core standard, the California Common Core state standards, making sure that all 5,000 of our students have equitable access to education, and quite frankly, pushing our teachers to make sure that we really are embracing equity, so that we appreciate experiences of all of our students, even if the majority of our students might be white.
And just to clarify, the comments in terms of having concern about this, in the same way there were comments about valuing programs that may be cut in the future earlier, value the position, think that Tara's doing great work, and just if we're going to be cutting in the classroom, just want to think about that in terms of what we're doing overall here.
Thank you.
I don't nearly have the background in education that the rest of you do, but certainly from an employment standpoint and asking somebody to do jobs, we're in a place where I'm mindful of the optics of this, but it's entirely clear to me the need. And it will be something we'll have to explain, but I think it's worth explaining. I support this. I mean, to explain to the community, explain when we go back out, and yeah, I think this is worth that extra effort, because I think it's been an open position for too long, and I think it's a role that needs to be filled.
If I may, real quick, when I arrived at the district nearly 5 years ago now, there was an assistant superintendent education services and a director of curriculum instruction. Both those positions are currently not there. And then there was a robust teacher leader program.
Right. Anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Karen?
I completely agree with all of your comments, most especially that Tara is at a breaking point, and we cannot afford to lose the stellar job that she is doing by actually breaking. So
I move that we approve.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those nay? Didn't say that quite right. Thank you. That
Thank
passed.
you. If I may, I promised Dr. Armstrong I'd give her a call. I'm going to go give her a call.
Oh,
Oh my God, she's going to be mad at you before you
No. She knows I'm calling.
so I think it's safe that given the hour, we can table the development of the new mission and vision statement, correct? Right, and also our students aren't here. Yeah, graduate profiles. And now we have the superintendent's report. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I thank you for tonight. I know that none of us relish this, and I do want to say there is time between now and May 15th to have creative conversations. I think passing the resolution, I know it's confusing to the public to say this, but passing the resolution provides us opportunities to have those conversations. There are 14 release periods out there. Those release periods, there's a lot to consider. I know that to the general public, it looked like this might have been willy-nilly and just throwing something at the wall. It wasn't. There were years and years of conversation through fiscal advisory. I think Karen's point is well taken. Swap out whatever cuts we're making, and it's just a different set of people in the room. Because we've cut so far from the classroom, we've tried really hard to keep that away. I think that there is a chance for us to be creative for me and my team to bring you more information, for you to consider other things between now and May 15th. I like to think that we can be flexible in thinking, and I do think we are in a new era of public education funding. The pensions it's a game changer. Special ed costs are a game changer. These things are game changers for us, so we're going to have to be creative in order to continue to provide robust programming to all of our students. So I thank you for what was a very difficult night, and I know that our work isn't over by a long shot.
Let me just comment before getting to the trustee comments. I think that what we did see tonight, though, is that if we're telling the public there is logic behind there has been many years behind this, but it's confusing to you, we should probably find a way of fixing that process, because if we're going to go out in November, we need the public to understand what we're doing, have confidence in it, so that we can then get this 2/3 that we need at that point. And I think, look, it may be a new day in public education, but we still have 62%. We're in one of the most supportive districts here. We can get to 2/3.
No, thank you. Any other trustee reports? Yeah, I don't really have anything to report out, I don't think. I can't think of anything. Who did the norms? Do you have anything you want to say? You're with Matt, probably. With Matt Willis, probably, huh? Yeah.
What I think we did well is I think we were prepared and present, fully engaged for 6 hours or whatever time it is right now. And I think there were good discussions. I think I commend us all for that.
Well, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.